I reincarnated as a cannon fodder warrior with a system that guaranteed any dungeon reward I actually earned. I woke in Harbor City inside a level 1 fighter named Evan Cole, seconds after his teammates used him as bait and left him bleeding beside a dead gray wolf. An uncleared gray zone kept expanding, and anyone trapped inside long enough turned to stone. A pale window marked the abandoned body as a surviving participant, so I planted one shaking boot under me and stood. Blood ran from my shoulder. 2 sets of footprints vanished through the fog. The last memory in this body was the rear line gunner laughing. "Leave him!" Cannon fodder did his job. The pair had finished the wolf, claimed their share, and walked away without checking my pulse. A puddle showed me an unfamiliar face. The body belonged to Evan Cole, an adult level 1 warrior. I had been an exhausted office worker. My last memory was working late at my desk. Now I occupied the man his teammates had discarded. The transfer's cause remained unknown. Original Evan's condition remained unknown too. The window offered the first useful answer. Reward choice system activated. After a completed dungeon, I could choose any reward inside that clear's eligible pool. I could not invent an unrelated object. The dungeon had to make it possible first. The dead wolf's clear still counted this body as a surviving participant. Those 2 geniuses had abandoned Evan and left his reward behind. I opened the pool. Fangbreaker carried a drop chance of 0.01%. The rare sword had penetration and an 80% instant kill chance against qualifying wolves below level 6. Greyhide armor was excellent equipment that added 10 points of defense. I chose both. A dark blade dropped into my hand. Gray plates tightened over my torn shirt and locked around my ribs. The weight felt real. So did the edge. The equipment steadied my breathing long enough for the inherited memories to settle. Gray zones had appeared 10 years earlier. Ordinary weapons lost most of their force inside the fog. Trapped civilians petrified, uncleared zones expanded, and class-holding professionals became humanity's only reliable fighters. Evan had awakened as a warrior, the class everyone wanted in front and nobody respected afterward. His first party entered with 3 people. The gray wolf charged a laser through its eye. The rear-line pair ordered Evan to hold still, waited until the beam tore through him, and attacked while the monster focused on his body. They celebrated the clear over his collapsed back. That memory gave me one useful rule: monsters might kill me from hunger. People would do it after deciding my survival belonged to them. My new life had started with attempted murder, premium loot, and no orientation. Benefits package, aggressive. I tested Fangbreaker against the dead wolf's horn. The blade passed through it with one clean pull. Then I looked toward the exit. The rear line pair had called this body disposable. Their mistake had already paid me better than any honest job I had ever worked. I left before the gray fog could thicken again. Minutes later, on the ride home, I sat near the back of a Harbor City bus and searched Evan's inherited memories for anything useful. The city outside looked ordinary until you noticed the reinforced shelters, warning lights, and gray stains on distant buildings. People still went to work. Buses still ran. Everyone simply lived beside expanding death zones and pretended the next alarm belonged to another street. I kept Fangbreakers stored and covered Greyhide beneath Evan's ripped coat. One clear had produced equipment people could attempt 100 times without seeing. Repeated clears gave me a route to survive. The bus warning lights turned red. The driver hit the brakes as gray fog swallowed the next intersection. Passengers shouted. A woman grabbed the overhead rail. A child dropped beneath the seats. The driver tried reversing, but the fog sealed around the bus before the wheels moved 5 feet. A white line flashed outside. The front half of the bus separated from the rear. Metal screamed. Seats tore loose. The roof folded toward me. I shoved 2 passengers down and caught the falling frame across Greyhide. The armor stopped the edge from entering my chest. It did not stop the impact from bruising every rib beneath it. I forced the frame aside and climbed through the split bus. The driver stared at the cut running through his dashboard. A professional. We need a professional. I am one. Relief moved through the survivors. Then the driver asked, Level? Level 1. Warrior. Hope died with impressive efficiency. One passenger looked at my torn coat. That thing outside is level 2. Another pointed through the fog. Warriors are barely stronger than civilians at level 1. I pulled Fangbreaker into my hand. The dark blade made everyone quiet for half a second. A level 2 rhinoceros stepped from the fog. Its eye charged the same white light that had cut the bus. The horn was wrapped in stone plates, and a damaged seam ran behind its jaw where the plates met thinner hide. I stepped into its line. Its horn hit Greyhide and lifted me. The plates held. I caught the horn with my left arm, let the charge carry me 3 steps, and turned my hips instead of fighting its full weight. The monster's head twisted. A narrow seam opened behind its jaw where the stone plates could not overlap. I drove Fangbreaker through it. The blade crossed hide, muscle, and the base of the skull in one pull. The rhinoceros ran 2 more steps without understanding that it was dead. Then the level 2 monster collapsed in front of the level 1 warrior everyone had already dismissed. Greyhide bought 1 impact. Fangbreaker's penetration opened the jaw seam, and the rhinoceros's straight charge finished the mistake. The win was not free. Greyhide had a fresh dent over my chest, my left arm shook from catching the horn, and blood from the reopened shoulder wound ran into my glove. The system improved my odds. My reopened shoulder and shaking left arm still paid for the win. The monster's eyes still held a weak charge. I cut through it before the light could rebuild, then kicked the horn away from the passenger line. The street stayed quiet. I pulled the sword free and looked back at the passengers. Now move in pairs. They moved. The woman who had called me barely stronger than ordinary people took the older passenger's arm. The man who had grabbed my sleeve helped the driver crawl through the broken windshield. Nobody argued with the warrior class while the rhinoceros leaked across the asphalt. A teenager raised a phone toward me. I covered Fangbreaker with my coat and stepped into the fog before the recording found a clean angle. Saving the bus had proved the system's reward could kill above my level. It had also proved witnesses came free with every public miracle. I left before an official team arrived. A gray zone expert reached the wreck minutes later. I learned only what became public. Witnesses described a level 1 warrior cutting down a level 2 monster, and the expert ordered a search for the unknown rescuer. Unfortunately, half the bus had cameras. At the next transit stop, a public screen interrupted its route map with shaky footage. Unknown level 1 warrior sought after gray zone bus rescue. My blurred silhouette stood beside the dead rhinoceros. Fangbreaker's outline was clear enough to make 3 waiting professionals lean toward the screen. One pointed at the image. "That sword is rare." Another zoomed in on his phone. "A level 1 carrying that?" The third looked down the street. I lowered my head and kept walking. The notice replayed the driver's description: torn dark coat, injured shoulder, rare sword, walking east. That was my clothing, my wound, and my current direction. Very considerate of him. The professionals near the screen began checking every man leaving the platform. I stepped into a maintenance stairwell, turned the coat inside out, and wrapped Fangbreaker in a discarded transit banner. When I returned, one professional blocked my path. "Did you see the wounded warrior from the bus?" I pointed toward the ambulance lights behind him. "He looked expensive. Try wherever expensive people go." The man ran toward the wreck. I went the other way. The trick bought me minutes. It also proved the problem had teeth. The public wanted a hero, professionals wanted a recruit, and at least a few people were already staring at the sword instead of the civilians it saved. I stored Fangbreaker, kept Greyhide hidden, and took the long route through surface alleys instead of going straight home. The system had made me stronger. Harbor City had immediately started looking for me. That evening, at Evan Cole's house, the audience became a bill. The house stood on a narrow residential street with patched siding and a front door that had been repaired twice. Evan's inherited memories hit hardest there. He had grown up inside those walls. He had taken the first dungeon job because the property carried $5 million in debt. 3 collection vehicles blocked the curb. A creditor waited on the porch with 2 hired professionals and a bright Caesar tag. He looked at my damaged coat, then at the outline of Greyhide beneath it. So the dead warrior came home with rare equipment. I had a productive morning. The creditor held out his hand. "The house secures the debt. Anything purchased with borrowed funds can be taken as collateral. The armor was earned after your paperwork stopped mattering." One hired professional grabbed my wrist. I turned his arm against the railing and pressed until his knees bent. The second professional reached for a weapon. I looked at him. He decided his coworker could finish learning alone. The creditor's smile thinned. $5 million. 3 days. Pay it or the house becomes ours. He nailed the Caesar tag beside the door. The fluorescent strip glowed like the world's ugliest countdown. The collectors left without my armor, but the tag stayed. Inside, I found market messages already waiting on Evan's phone. Rare weapons sold for hundreds of thousands. High-grade skills sold for more. One person had offered $500,000 for a range drop. Another promised negotiable pay for a dangerous mission. Then, the daily entry rule appeared in Evan's memories. Most licensed dungeons admitted 1 clear attempt per professional every 24 hours. 3 days. 1 entry per day, $5 million. Low-level farming could not close that gap. The system could guarantee the best eligible reward. It could not make a cheap dungeon valuable. I looked at the bright tag through the window. To save the house, I needed a dungeon far above Evan's level, a reward expensive enough to sell, and enough armor to survive the people who would notice. The rear-line pair had left me beside one dead wolf. By morning, I planned to turn their abandoned reward into a level 3 clear. The next morning, at Harbor City's licensed gates, I found the 2 people who had left Evan to die. The rear-line gunner and caster stood beside a level 2 entrance looking for another warrior. They recognized the armor outline under my coat before they recognized the face. The gunner's smile froze. "You survived. I collected what you abandoned." His hand moved toward Fangbreaker. I rested mine on the hilt. He reconsidered. A tiny miracle. You should worry about the 5 million debt on your house, the caster snapped. Everyone near the market knows, so the gossip works faster than you fight. The gunner stepped closer. Tank are clear. We might pay you enough to keep one window. The money you owe is expensive, I told him. The life you owe costs more. The gunner stopped smiling. The caster looked at him, and both remembered the same thing. They had ordered Evan to hold the wolf's laser, watched him collapse, and left before confirming the body. I had not accused them in public. I had only named a debt nobody else understood. That was enough. The caster lowered her voice. The gunner answered without looking at her. Then let the next dungeon finish it. They had made the referral motive audible too. Excellent customer disclosure. I turned toward Iron Ridge Fort. The level 3 portal carried a warning that my level sat below the recommended entry. It also showed a reward pool wide enough to contain S-grade skill books. One high-grade ranged book could cover more than $1 million. 3 strong clears might save the house. A lower-level dungeon would be safer and useless. The daily gate limit made caution expensive. Their laughter returned only after I had walked far enough for them to pretend the silence never happened. Another group arrived before they recovered completely. A one-eyed leader in reinforced gear walked at the front. 2 shooters followed him, then a healer and a knife user. All 5 carried level 3 badges. The rear-line gunner raised his voice before they passed. That warrior survived a wolf beam yesterday. His armor can absorb anything. The one-eyed leader looked from Greyhide to my level badge. Anything? The caster hooked a thumb toward me. Put him in front. He loves feeling useful. There it was. Betrayal had a referral program. The one-eyed leader lowered his voice, but he wanted me to hear. If the armor performs, you get the introduction fee. The gunner answered just as loudly. Make sure he takes the first hit. The pair had sold my durability, my debt, and my body in one conversation. The one-eyed leader came close enough to inspect the scratches on Greyhide. You enter under my command, he told me. You stand where I point, take what hits first, and receive whatever share I decide. Strong opening. Do you also steal lunch from children? His jaw tightened. The rear-line caster laughed too loudly. See? He acts brave because the armor saved him once. The leader tapped my level badge. Level 1, Warrior. Debt notice is on his house. He will obey when the gate closes. That was his entire read on me. Low number, bad class, no money. Therefore no choice. He had mistaken pressure for ownership. The portal flashed the underlevel warning again. Leaving would preserve my body for 1 day. It would also burn the only entry window with enough upside to threaten the debt. I accepted the trial. The one-eyed leader smiled, as if I had accepted him. He thought the gate had made me his property. I planned to correct him inside. I could have walked away. A lower-level clear could not save the house. Another level 3 party could carry the same kind of parasite. The portal offered the reward range I needed, and the people in front of it had just explained exactly how they planned to use me. An obvious trap becomes easier once the idiots label every moving part. I stepped through Iron Ridge Fort. Inside Iron Ridge Fort, I stood with 5 strangers and one objective. Repel the bandit assault. Defeat any commander who entered the square. Surviving participants earned a clear pool based on contribution. Stone walls surrounded a narrow village square. Wooden barricades blocked 3 streets. The portal sealed behind us while warning bells rang from the fort tower. The one-eyed leader pointed at the northern barricade. Warrior in front, healer behind him, shooters on the roofs, knife scout takes the west alley. I stayed where I was. He pointed again. Move! No! The healer looked between us. The leader stepped into my space. Your role is to draw fire. My role is to kill what needs killing. Charging first because you brought guns is not strategy. It is outsourcing your funeral. One shooter laughed. A warrior refusing to tank. I watched the previous owner die doing exactly what you asked. I am trying a revolutionary method called learning. The one-eyed leader put a hand on my shoulder. I removed it. He looked at the others. Fine. Everyone protects themselves. He gets no healing. The healer opened her mouth. The leader cut her off. No healing. Perfect, I said. Now your plan matches your personality. Bandits entered the eastern street before he could answer. They carried short swords and shields. The shooters fired first, expecting easy targets. The bandits moved like low-level monsters. They turned their shields into the rounds, changed pace between shots, and reached the first barricade alive. The knife user vanished down the west alley. The one-eyed leader shouted for concentrated fire. The shooters adjusted and dropped 2 attackers. 3 more vaulted the barricade. 1 circled behind the healer. She saw the shadow too late. The bandit's sword came down toward her neck. I crossed the square and caught the blade on Fangbreaker. The impact drove the bandit's arm backward. I turned the block into a cut and split his weapon in half. His confidence lasted until the broken blade hit the ground. I kicked him through the barricade. The healer moved behind me without asking permission. That changed the formation more honestly than any speech. The one-eyed leader saw it and grew angrier at the rescue than at the attack. "You abandoned your position," he snapped. "I never accepted one." More bandits surrounded us. I cut through the first attacker and let Greyhide take a glancing hit from the second. The armor stopped the edge. The impact still bruised the shoulder beneath it. A round passed beside my face and struck the bandit behind me. Then another flattened against Greyhide's back. The angle was wrong for an accident. I turned. One shooter held his rifle directly through my position. The other raised a second weapon from the roof. The one-eyed leader glanced at them and gave a small nod. There was the plan. "Keep firing," he ordered. "The warrior is blocking our lane." The first volley hit the bandits around me. The second came lower. Rounds flattened against Greyhide's chest, shoulders, and ribs. Every impact punched pain through the armor without breaking skin. The healer stared at the crushed bullets falling around my boots. The shooters kept going because the first betrayal had taught them. Evan could absorb punishment, and because the old pair had sold them the same idea. Disposable people are convenient until they turn around. I walked toward the roof ladder. The shooter stopped laughing. The one-eyed leader moved between us. "You are working with the bandits. Why else would you block our attacks? You fired through me. You survived." That sentence explained the whole hierarchy. Survival had become permission. I raised Fangbreaker. The healer stepped behind my right side. She had chosen her line. The first shooter lowered his rifle a fraction. The second did not. He fired again, aiming low where the armor plate separated around my knee. I turned the blade. The round struck Fangbreaker, flattened, and spun into the dirt. The shooter stared at the ruined metal. "Do it again," I told him. He looked at the one-eyed leader. The leader gave no order this time. He had wanted an obedient shield, not a witness walking toward the roof. The healer raised her staff between us. "The bandits are still attacking!" "She noticed," I said. "Excellent team awareness." A bandit vaulted the western barricade behind the leader. The healer warned him. He turned late. I crossed a distance, cut the attacker through the shoulder, and kicked the body into the second shooter's firing lane. The shooter stumbled backward. I had saved the same people who were trying to shoot through me. That did not make their behavior forgivable. It made their excuses smaller. The one-eyed leader grabbed the healer's staff. "You heal my line, not him." She pulled it free. "He is the only reason your line still exists." That cost her the protection she had been promised. It also made the choice audible to everyone. The first shooter looked away. The second kept his weapon raised because embarrassment had already spent too much of his brain. The knife user returned from the west alley and saw the crushed rounds on the ground. He looked at the leader instead of me. Before anyone could decide whether the party fight started first, an explosion tore through the south wall. A giant bandit entered the square carrying an iron club wider than my torso. The trial updated. Fortress commander arrived. Defeat the commander to complete the clear. The commander struck the ground. Stone lifted in a ring. The knife user was thrown across the square. One shooter fell from the roof. The one-eyed leader lost his weapon before the first exchange finished. The man who had ordered me to stand in front looked at the boss, then at me. "Tank it," he said. Of course he did. The party had spent the opening trying to kill its warrior. Now the fortress boss had arrived, and every person who called me useless suddenly remembered my job description. The fortress commander swung once and broke the eastern barricade. The shooter who had fired through me crawled from the roof rubble and pointed at my armor. "Hold it for 10 seconds, he shouted. "We can damage it from range." "Your range included my spine 5 seconds ago." The boss charged the one-eyed leader. He ran behind me. "Do your roll!" I stepped aside. The iron club passed where my head had been and struck the leader across the square. His reinforced chest piece folded. One arm bent at the wrong angle. He hit the wall and stayed conscious only because humiliation had unfinished business. The boss turned toward the nearest shooter. The man fired everything he had. Rounds sparked against the commander's chest and left shallow marks. One hit the left side beneath its arm and chipped a line in the armor. The boss immediately guarded that side. Useful. The shooter saw the damage and mistook one chip for control. "Keep it on me," he told the others. "I found the weak point." Then he ran behind the healer. She moved away from him. Relationship update received. The commander stomped through the square. I tested Fangbreaker against its shoulder and felt the blade stop inside layered metal. Raw force would not solve it. I cut lower. The boss turned the left side away again. The chip seam mattered. The one-eyed leader pushed himself upright with his good arm. "Knife user, cage it." The knife user pulled a metal device from his belt. The healer saw it and shouted, "That cage traps everything inside the circle." The leader's eye stayed on me. He had not changed plans. The boss had simply become a larger excuse. The knife user threw 4 anchors around the commander. A blue wall rose between them. I was inside the circle too. The shooter outside laughed. 10 seconds! Hold it! The cage timer appeared above us. 10 seconds. The commander swung. I ducked under the club and cut the damaged left seam. The edge entered farther than before. The boss covered it with one forearm and drove a knee into my chest. Greyhide stopped the point of its armor. The force sent me across the cage. My ribs had collected enough educational material for one morning. The timer fell. 7 seconds. Outside, the one-eyed leader crawled toward the cage boundary. The knife user adjusted one anchor. The circle shifted. The leader entered as I was pushed toward the opposite wall. He expected the cage to release him when the others fired the finishing volley. The shooter raised his weapon. The healer knocked the barrel aside. "You are shooting both of them." "The warrior survives," the shooter snapped. "And the leader?" The shooter hesitated. The cage timer reached 5 seconds. I had half the duration left. The commander's seam was damaged, but it guarded the opening every time Fangbreaker moved toward it. So I aimed at the head. The boss raised both arms. That uncovered the seam. I changed direction and cut left. The blade entered another inch. The commander roared and grabbed my sword arm. The one-eyed leader moved behind it and shouted, "Now!" The shooter fired. The boss turned toward the noise. The round struck its back and drove it forward. Its club came down where the leader stood. He tried to cross the cage wall. The blue barrier rejected him. The club crushed the ground and the man beneath it. His own trap had left him alone with the thing he wanted me to hold. The cage dropped 1 second later. The knife user stared at the body. The healer stared at him. The shooter blamed me immediately. "You killed the leader." "No. Your plan did. I only respected team ownership." The fortress commander pulled Fangbreaker from its seam and threw me toward the western wall. I landed badly. My right hand went numb. The boss charged the shooter next. He ran. I could have let the commander finish the complaint department. The clear pool would disappear if every surviving participant died, and the house did not accept moral satisfaction as payment. So I followed. The shooter reached the broken barricade. The boss raised its club. I cut the back of its knee, changed the angle, and drove it toward the man who had demanded I tank. He screamed louder than the bus passengers. The boss's club struck beside his head and buried itself in stone. While it pulled free, the damaged left seam opened. Every earlier clue lined up: the first chipped round, the guarded turn, the deeper cut, the exposed line during the head feint. I forced feeling into my right hand, gripped Fangbreaker with both hands, and drove the blade through the seam. Penetration carried the edge beneath the armor. The fortress commander froze. I pushed until the sword reached its core. The giant body collapsed beside the shooter. The clear notice appeared before the dust settled. The surviving shooter remained on his knees beside the commander. His rifle was empty. The leader's body lay inside the broken cage anchors. The trap had converted his authority into a boundary he could not cross. The healer checked the knife user first, then the shooter. She did not approach the leader until every living person had been treated. The knife user pulled one anchor from the ground and stared at it. He told me the cage would release the party leader. "It released him," I said, very comprehensively. The healer gave me a look. The anchor started it. Her mouth moved despite the bodies around us. One short breath of laughter escaped before she stopped it. The section of the team that had behaved like people was still alive. The people who treated a warrior as disposable had been crushed by their own positioning. The boss's damaged seam remained visible beneath Fangbreaker. Every attack before the final thrust had paid into the line: the first chipped round, the guarded turn, the head feint, the cage volley, and the back of knee cut. No system notice had explained the weakness. The commander had protected it until its own reactions made the answer obvious. Iron Ridge Fort cleared. 20 experience awarded. Level increased, 2. The surviving shooter stared at the dead boss, then at me. The healer lowered her weapon. The knife user looked at the cage anchors and decided eye contact was dangerous. Loot rights opened by contribution. The shooter reached for the commander's chest. I put Fangbreaker across his path. "You fired through me, ran from the boss, and used your leader as cage furniture." He pulled his hand back. The knife user tried a different angle. "We still participated, so did the barricades." The healer stepped beside me. "He killed the commander. He decides." Her line closed the argument. The two surviving attackers thanked me because the exit would not open until every claimant acknowledged the clear distribution. The shooter's voice cracked around the words. The knife user sounded as if each syllable cost money. "Good. Gratitude should occasionally hurt." I opened the eligible reward pool. The commander clear offered equipment, skills, and books far above a normal level. To result, because the trial was level 3 and my contribution owned the kill. I chose Sleepforge first. The skill promised combat training during sleep against copies built from my own movements. It could improve learned technique without waking injury, though fatigue remained real. I chose Gale Step second. The movement skill compressed one burst of speed into a short line. Distance and repeated use scaled the stamina cost. The third choice was an S-grade ranged skill book. I could not use it as a warrior, which made it perfect for the debt. The 3 rewards materialized separately. The surviving shooter stared at the S-grade book as if the clear had personally insulted him. He had spent the fight treating my body as disposable, and the reward pool had placed more money in my hands than his entire contribution could claim. The knife user checked his smaller reward, then the book, then the dead leader inside the cage marks. His expression completed a useful education without requiring me to teach a class. The healer accepted her own reward and moved toward the exit. Before leaving, she looked at Greyhide's dents and the blood beneath my sleeve. "You should treat that shoulder." "Excellent. The party's healing policy has evolved." Her face tightened. I argued with him. "You chose a side when it mattered. That was enough." She had moved behind me before the boss and stopped the shooter's first finishing volley. I did not need a speech from either of us. Sleepforge entered my body as a cold mark behind the eyes. Gale step settled into my calves. The skill book dropped into my hand with a sealed silver cover. The shooter stared at it. The knife user stopped pretending the loot division had been fair to him. The healer saw both reactions and moved closer to the exit. I listed the book on Harbor City's professional market before leaving the reward chamber. The first offers arrived within minutes. 800,000, 900,000. Then one buyer offered $1.2 million and ordered me to come alone. He called the price generous for a mere warrior. I accepted the meeting. By morning, Sleepforge would tell me whether the system could turn rest into skill. After that, the buyer would learn what mere warrior cost when the warrior controlled the merchandise. That night, Sleepforge dragged me into a black training yard before my head finished touching the pillow. The space had no walls, no sky, and one person waiting beneath a white light. Me. The copy held Fangbreaker with my stance, my grip, and every bad habit I had shown since waking in Evan's body. It attacked first. I blocked high. The copy cut low and opened my leg. Pain arrived. Blood did not. Then the copy drove Fangbreaker through my chest. The yard vanished. I woke in bed with my ribs still bruised from Iron Ridge and both hands locked around the blanket. No new wound. Full memory. Real fatigue. Sleepforge had delivered the educational experience of dying without the inconvenience of burial. I closed my eyes again. The yard returned with 2 copies. One attacked my sword side. The second waited for the exact retreat I had used against the fortress commander. They killed me faster. Third attempt, 3 copies. Fourth attempt, 4. Each death exposed one habit. I raised my shoulder before a reverse cut. I planted my rear heel before driving through armor. I watched the weapon instead of the hips when pressure came from both sides. The copies never explained anything. They punished the answer until I changed it. That was good teaching, horrible bedside manner. I corrected the raised shoulder and survived 6 seconds longer. I shortened the rear step and cut 1 copy before the others reached me. I stopped chasing blades and read the center line. 2 copies collided because I moved before their attacks finished committing. The yard added more. By midnight, I faced 10 versions of myself. By dawn, the number had become absurd. Sleepforge did not make the copies weaker when I grew tired. It made my mistakes easier to see because exhaustion removed the polite excuses. The final wave buried me under blades. I woke with my jaw clenched, my shirt wet, and my hands shaking hard enough to spill water across the floor. The skill screen showed the result. The copies attacked again before I could celebrate. Level gains apparently came with immediate quality control. This time, I stopped trying to overpower them. I shortened the first cut, let the second copy reveal the correction, and moved before the third reached the position where my old retreat always ended. The fourth copy caught my left wrist anyway. I changed hands. Fangbreaker felt wrong in my right grip for one exchange and usable in the next. The copies adjusted. I adjusted faster. The yard reset 6 more times. Each death removed 1 piece of pride from the technique. My shoulders stopped lifting before a downward cut. My back foot stopped crossing behind the front. The blade began reaching the target without the dramatic circle I had mistaken for power. On the final attempt, the first copy entered my range. I cut its wrist. The second attacked from the blind side. I turned the hilt, caught the strike, and drove the pommel through its face. The third waited for my retreat. I did not retreat. I stepped inside and cut it first. The fourth copy smiled with my face and changed tactics. Sleepforge had built the thing for my movements, which meant the smugness was technically mine. Offensive. It killed me 1 more time. I woke with the correction already in my hands. My fingers trembled from fatigue, the shoulder wound pulled under the bandage, and the muscles along my forearm felt as if I had trained for hours because I had. The skill screen showed the result. Basic sword technique, level 3. One night had raised the body's technique from level 2 to level 3. The cost sat in my muscles. My legs felt as if Galestep had been used for hours even though the movement skill remained untested in the waking world. The system had turned sleep into training, not recovery. Useful distinction. My body wanted to file a complaint. A public news clip played on Evan's phone while I dressed. I learned later that Grey Zone analyst Nora Quinn had compared the blurred bus footage with a failed seer prediction. The seer had expected the bus zone to produce mass casualties. Nora said an unknown variable had entered after the forecast. That was all the public knew. No one had my name. No one had the system. The sentence still told me official curiosity was growing. I covered Greyhide, stored Fangbreaker, and went to meet the skillbook buyer. The meeting point was a warehouse alley near the industrial market. The buyer waited beside a black vehicle with one lookout on the roof and another near the loading door. He was a large level 4 professional with a pistol at his waist and the posture of a man who thought preparation belonged only to him. My hand still trembled from Sleepforge. He noticed. His smile improved. "You are the seller?" I held up the sealed book. "Payment first." The agreed price was 1.2 million. His transfer arrived as 800,000. I checked the number once, then I looked at him. He spread his hands. "Market adjustment." The market adjusted after we agreed. "You are level 2, a warrior. You have no auction house, no guild protection, and no one here who will believe you over me." The rooftop lookout shifted toward the edge. The loading door guard locked the alley gate. The buyer drew his pistol. "Hand over the book." Sleepforge fatigue had shown him a shaking arm. The level badge had shown him a weak class. The empty alley had shown him a victim. He had gathered 3 accurate facts and built the wrong conclusion. I tested Gale Step. The skill tightened through my calves. The alley disappeared for one breath. The buyer's pistol fired at the space I had left. I reappeared inside his reach with one hand around his throat. The burst cost more than expected. Both calves cramped immediately, and my tired body almost lost the line. The buyer never saw the stumble because his back hit the vehicle first. I lifted until his boots left the ground. "What was the adjustment?" His hand clawed at my wrist. "You cannot attack a licensed buyer. You drew a gun after stealing $400,000. The rooftop lookout aimed down. I turned the buyer into his firing line. The lookout lowered his weapon. The loading door guard tested the lock, decided the alley had changed owners, and quietly unlocked it. "Good employee! Fast learner!" The buyer forced air through his throat. "Transfer. I will transfer it, plus 200,000 for the gun." "That is robbery. You brought visual aids." The full balance arrived. Then the compensation. My account showed $1.4 million. I released him. He dropped beside the vehicle and rubbed his neck. The buyer expected me to keep the book and leave. I handed it over. His confusion was almost insulting. "We made a sale," I told him. "You made it dramatic." Then I picked up his pistol and offered it. "Grip first." He stared at the weapon. "I am returning this because I am a man of principle." The loading door guard looked away so the buyer could suffer privately. The buyer took the gun with both hands. He thanked me, not for sparing his life, for honoring the sale after he tried stealing it. Human standards remain ambitious. Once he had the book, his fear relaxed enough to become greed again. He said the skill completed his team's build for Dead City, a level 5 survival dungeon below the standard cap for veteran professionals. Entrants were scattered through a ruined district and had to survive 72 hours. Most called it newbie hell. I asked where the portal stood. He blinked. "You are level 2. You noticed. You cannot clear Dead City." High mortality means high eligibility. That is not how responsible people hear that sentence. Responsible people did not owe $5 million in 3 days. The $1.4 million from the book gave me a start. The house still needed $3.6 million before the deadline. A level 5 perfect drop could close the gap in one sale. The buyer gave me the portal location because fear had made him cooperative and greed made him curious. He also warned that the trial's normal objective was survival, not elimination. Killing one boss did not necessarily end the timer. That rule mattered. I left the alley, bought food, medical spray, and a sealed hemostatic kit, then stood before Dead City's portal before noon. The underlevel warning filled the gate. Current level, 2. Trial class, 5. Expected survival, low. I looked at the 5 million deadline on Evan's phone. Dead City's 72-hour timer would outlast the house clock if I followed the normal route. That meant surviving was not enough. I had to find a faster clear the dungeon had not advertised. I accepted. The portal swallowed me before caution could prepare another speech. Inside Dead City, the portal dropped me alone beside a stripped convenience store. The trial had grouped me with 11 strangers, then scattered all 12 across the ruined district. My timer kept counting from 72 hours, while the house deadline kept doing its own much less patient math outside. The trial gave one objective: find the other professionals. Survive 3 days. 100 approaching footsteps supplied the second objective: do not get eaten before lunch. I concealed Greyhide beneath Evan's coat and entered the store through a broken side door. Most shelves had already been emptied. I took bottled water, packaged food, and one sealed medical kit. The rest was clutter with branding. A can rolled across the floor behind me. I turned with Fangbreaker ready. A zombie lunged from the stockroom. Its jaw snapped at my shoulder and met Greyhide instead. I drove the blade through its neck, kicked the body away, and listened. More feet dragged outside because the trial had separated the team, hidden the useful supplies, and placed monsters beside the leftovers. Newbie Hell had decent theme consistency. Glass exploded at the front of the store as a man came through the window backward, hit a display rack, and rolled beneath it. Zombies poured through the opening after him. The man wore a gunner's badge and held a heavy rifle. He looked old enough to know better and terrified enough to forget. "Professional," he shouted when he saw me. "I'm safe." That was Derek Shaw, an adult gunner from the scattered team. At that moment, his main qualification was bringing half the street through my window. "Trouble follows you aggressively," I told him. Derek fired past my shoulder. The round broke one zombie's knee, but two more climbed over it. I stepped into the aisle. Fangbreaker opened the first throat. I turned the same motion into a reverse cut and dropped the second. A third grabbed my coat. Greyhide caught its nails while I drove an elbow through its face and finished it under the jaw. Derek kept firing from behind the rack. His shots stopped anything reaching my blind side while mine removed everything that survived. Within seconds, the immediate attackers covered the entrance. Derek stared at the bodies. "You're level 2? You broke my window before introducing yourself. We both have questions." Derek glanced around the wrecked aisles. "I didn't know you owned the store. I tapped the counter. I claimed it 12 seconds ago. Respect local business." He laughed once, mostly from panic leaving his lungs. Then another moan rolled down the street in waves. Each wave ended beneath a harsh mechanical screech beyond the store. Fresh zombies kept turning toward that sound and funneling into our block. Derek moved beside me and checked the street. "More are coming! They're being called!" Across the road, a swollen zombie stood on a wrecked bus. Its chest expanded with every siren-like cry. The horde shifted whenever it screamed. That creature explained why killing the front rank changed nothing. Could I cross the store, reach the loudspeaker zombie, and kill it before the next wave buried us? Derek counted the street. "There are too many." "Then stop counting and cover the aisle." He checked his ammunition. One magazine remained in the rifle, with nothing waiting on his belt. "I have one load left," Derek warned. "I need 5 seconds." He looked at the bus, then at the bodies inside the store. 5 seconds is a long time when everything has teeth. 4 if you stop negotiating. Derek reloaded. I moved toward the broken window. The screamer inhaled. Every zombie in the block turned toward me. I activated Gale's step. The first burst carried me across the street and onto a wrecked car. The second drove pain through both calves but put me within one jump of the bus. Behind me, Derek fired. The rifle became a steady wall. One zombie fell across the doorway. Another climbed over it. Derek changed targets without wasting rounds. 1 second. 2. A crawling zombie grabbed his ankle from beneath the rack. Derek kicked it away and kept firing. 3. The screamer released another call. The street surged. I jumped from the car, caught the bus frame, and drove Fangbreaker through the swollen chest. The scream ended inside the body. 4 seconds! The horde lost direction. I pulled the blade free, dropped from the bus, and ran back. Derek's rifle clicked empty. 5 seconds! A zombie reached his left shoulder as the last shot failed. Derek had kept the lane exactly as promised. That earned my return. I crossed the entrance and cut the zombie before its mouth closed. The rest of the horde crashed into the store without the screamer's formation. Random bodies were still a problem when there were 60 of them. I overturned a shelf into the first line. Derek used the rifle as a club on anything reaching the side aisle. We backed toward the stockroom while broken displays narrowed the approach. A heavy freezer stood against the rear wall. I cut its power cable, kicked the wheels loose, and shoved. Greyhide took the impact against my shoulder as the freezer rolled down the aisle. It crushed 3 zombies into the fallen rack and turned the entrance into a pileup. Derek grabbed a loose metal bar and helped me drop the upper display onto them. The rack fell beneath their weight. I crossed the fallen metal and finished the last 4 before they could stand. The store went quiet again. Derek sat against the counter and looked at the bodies. "You came back. You paid for 5 seconds. That was the deal? That was the deal!" His left shoulder had been torn open through the armor seam. "I used the hemostatic kit and pressed medical spray into the wound," Derek hissed. "You carry emergency supplies? I entered a 72-hour death trial. I also brought snacks." "Which matters more? The snacks have not tried biting me." Derek's shoulder stopped bleeding, but he could not hold the rifle properly. We left through the stockroom and followed the survivors' signal pulses toward the center district. The loudspeaker zombie's death had broken the horde's formation. It had not made the streets empty. Bodies wandered through intersections, then accelerated whenever a distant metallic cry rolled between the buildings. Derek carried the rifle in his uninjured arm and used the sling to brace it against his chest. I took the front because I chose the route, not because somebody had assigned my body to it. At the first crossing, 3 zombies attacked from a bus shelter. Derek fired once and dropped the farthest. I cut the 2 closer bodies before they reached his bad side. At the second, a survivor signal blinked from an apartment balcony. The person waving had already attracted 6 bodies into the lobby below. Derek looked at the ammunition counter. We cannot rescue everyone we see. Correct. The balcony survivor kicked a planter onto one zombie and kept signaling. I changed direction. Derek sighed. That sounded less correct in practice. She is still fighting. That was the price. I did not return for every person who shouted. I returned for people who spent something before asking me to spend myself. Derek covered the entrance while I cleared the lobby. The survivor came down carrying 2 sealed water bottles and a maintenance key. She gave 1 bottle to Derek before drinking her own. Useful behavior continued earning protection. The maintenance key opened a service corridor that bypassed the next street. The rescue had cost ammunition and return time. Derek looked at the key, then at me. You calculate loyalty like money. Money is less reliable. 2 blocks later, another professional ran from an alley with a packed group behind him. 2 blocks later, another professional ran from an alley with a packed group behind him. They had found a safe house in an office tower and were collecting entrants. The group's loudest member carried a planner's badge and spoke as if the trial had hired him. He saw Derek leaning on me and frowned. Wounded people slow the route, then walk faster. The planner ignored that. We have a scoring model. The trial rewards participants based on targeted kills and survival contribution. We found a high-value corpse king near the tower, Derek said. The objective says, survive. The planner smiled. Hidden scores always matter. His followers liked that answer because it transformed fear into math and put him in charge of the calculator. We joined them because the safe house held supplies and because the corpse king could reveal whether the trial had an early clear route. The tower lobby had reinforced doors and rainwater trapped in broken planters. Survivors had blocked the stairs with desks. One woman tried taking Derek's rifle because his shoulder was injured. I took the rifle first and handed it back to him with the strap adjusted for one arm. Derek smiled at her. Local business rules. He was learning. The planner divided everyone into score groups. He placed Derek near the rear and me beside the entrance. Warriors hold the door, he said. I looked at the bodies outside. This joke keeps finding new writers. The corpse king arrived before the argument grew legs. It was taller than the store screamer and wrapped in dried black tissue. Its chest had several overlapping faces pressed beneath the skin. A crown of bone rose from its skull. The planner pointed at it. Primary target, maximum contribution. The creature ignored him. It looked past me, past Derek, and toward a professional hiding near the stairwell. Then, it crossed the lobby with one burst and killed that man first. The planner's score theory had predicted the corpse king would attack the highest visible threat. Instead, it selected something else. The dead man's body twitched. Black roots moved beneath the floor toward him. I looked at the rainwater, the roots, and the corpse king's sudden target choice. The trial had just told me the score model was wrong. The planner raised his weapon anyway. Everyone on the boss! The corpse king turned toward a second hidden target. Whatever it was hunting, it was not the loudest professional in the room. The planner celebrated when the corpse king crossed the first target line. His people fired from the lobby while Derek and I watched the monster ignore every obvious threat. The corpse king took rounds through the chest, lost half one arm, and kept moving toward the same survivor. Black roots dragged beneath its feet. The planner shouted, "The score is working! Keep pressure on it!" The corpse king killed the survivor he had chosen. The body hit the wet floor. Roots entered the corpse before the blood stopped moving. Every zombie outside the tower turned toward the lobby at once. The planner's smile weakened. I stepped beside the dead body. Water had pooled around the roots. The corpse king's lower leg shifted with each ripple before the upper body reacted. I kicked a broken bottle into the far side of the puddle. The creature turned toward the sound through 3 infected bodies outside. Remote eyes. The corpse king was not choosing targets by score. It was reading through the infected network and selecting people linked to something beneath the building. The planner pointed at me. Stop interfering. Your hidden score just killed 2 people. They were weak. The corpse king moved toward him. For one beautiful second, the universe handled customer service. He backed away. Why is it targeting me? You became interesting. The planner ordered 3 followers to hold the monster. They obeyed because admitting the model was wrong would also admit they had trusted him into a kill zone. The first fighter lost his shield. The second was thrown through a glass wall. The third reached the stairs and stopped listening. The planner ran for the upper floor. The corpse king followed him instead of Derek's bleeding shoulder or my drawn sword. That confirmed the target connection was active and selective. I cut the roots beneath the dead body. The corpse king stumbled on the stairs. Derek saw it. You moved it from here. The roots are carrying more than flesh. The planner looked down from the landing. Do not cut them. They might be worth points. The corpse king caught his ankle and pulled him through the railing. His scream ended when the body hit the lobby. No system score appeared. No reward notice arrived. His model died with its loudest believer. The remaining survivors stopped taking orders from the corpse. Good start. The roots under the lobby thickened as more zombies entered the street. I ordered everyone above the waterline. One man argued until a root wrapped his boot. Derek shot it loose with his good arm, and the argument retired. The office tower's lower floors were connected to an old sewage pumping network. Broken pipes ran through the basement, and every infected body carried black fibers toward the same drainage route. The Corpse King climbed from the lobby floor again, its broken arm rebuilt from two smaller bodies pulled through the doors. Killing the visible body would not matter while the network fed it. I told Derek to move the survivors upstairs and keep them away from standing water. Derek looked at his shoulder. I cannot cover everyone. You covered 5 seconds with one magazine. That sounded more reasonable before I did it. Use the lesson. He took the stairs. I followed the roots into the basement. The first corridor flooded to my ankles. Gray pipes crossed the ceiling. Every few seconds, a pump coughed somewhere deeper, and the roots tightened against the walls. Zombies moved behind locked service doors before I reached them. Remote sight let the network feel my approach. I threw a bolt down the left corridor. 3 bodies attacked the sound. I went right. The roots changed direction beneath the water. That response proved the network used vibration and infected senses together. A maintenance diagram hung beside the pump controls. I needed one glance, not an engineering degree. The main sewage line fed a central collection chamber under the tower. The trial had built a zombie factory below the safe house. Of course it had. Newbie hell believed in vertical integration. The corridor doors burst open. I used Fangbreaker in shortcuts because wide swings hit pipes and turned the basement into a different kind of death trial. Greyhide caught teeth and nails. Impact accumulated beneath the plates. My ribs had stopped filing separate complaints and formed a union. The roots retreated whenever I cut near the main pipe. They protected the route more than the bodies. I reached the pumping chamber and found a wall of infected flesh around the sewage inlet. Limbs and faces had fused into one moving filter. Every pump cycle pushed black fluid into the district lines. That was the factory. The Corpse King dropped through the stairwell behind me. It had followed through the network and rebuilt most of its body on the way. I cut the nearest root bundle. The wall replaced it. Direct damage was too slow. A service elevator stood above the chamber on an open maintenance shaft. Its counterweight hung beside the main pipe. 2 cars occupied the shaft. One still moved on the powered track. The second hung crooked over the basement, held by 2 strained cables and a damaged brake. I tested the working controls. The roots along the wall tightened when the motor engaged. Power, movement, and the infected network were still sharing the same infrastructure. The Corpse King watched through 3 bodies climbing the stairs behind it. I cut those bodies first. The boss turned toward the last sound instead of the control panel. Blind, without the remote eyes. I threw Fangbreaker's sheath against the damaged car. The metal rang through the shaft. The Corpse King changed direction immediately. Sound could replace sight for one movement. It could not tell the monster what waited beneath the noise. I entered the working car and sent it upward. The doors closed as the Corpse King reached them. Its hands punched through the metal and tore the panels apart. I climbed through the roof hatch while the car rose. The Corpse King followed onto the moving roof. Across the shaft, the damaged car waited on its 2 cables. I threw a loose stone onto it. The impact echoed. The boss leaped. I cut the first support cable. The damaged car tilted violently. The Corpse King lost its footing as the remaining line took the full weight. The car fell. For one beautiful second, gravity handled customer service. Then the Corpse King caught the last cable with one hand. Of course it did. The hanging car swung beneath it. The boss hauled itself upward with enough strength to shake the shaft. I had expected a second problem. Gale's step drove me from the wall brace onto the cable. I ran down the vibrating line while the Corpse King raised its free hand. The shaft gave it only sound and timing. I threw the sheath against the opposite wall. The boss punched toward the impact while I passed its open side. My first cut deepened the chest line from the corridor. The Corpse King roared and reached for me. I cut the final cable. The damaged car dropped away beneath the boss, hanging in empty space for half a breath. I planted one foot against its shoulder, used the fall to stretch its body, and drove Fangbreaker through the opened line. The level 3 sword technique held the angle. The rare blade completed the cut. I cut the Corpse King in half. Both pieces fell into the basement with the elevator car. The impact shook dust from every floor. The Corpse King charged. I ran toward the shaft, hit Gale's step once, and felt my left calf tighten hard enough to threaten a tear. The monster followed into the elevator lane. I cut the emergency brake cable. The car dropped from the floor above. The Corpse King raised both arms and caught it. For half a second, the monster held several tons of steel over its head. The planner would have called that bonus score. I called it positioning. I cut the counterweight release. The weight fell on the opposite side. The elevator car ripped downward with double force. The Corpse King's body split across the waist. The upper half struck the flooded floor. The lower half stayed beneath the car. Black roots lashed from the walls, trying to reconnect both pieces. I severed the main sewage pipe between them. Pressure exploded through the chamber. Water and black fluid tore the root network from the walls. The infected factory convulsed as its supply reversed. I drove Fangbreaker through the Corpse King's crown and pinned the upper half beneath the elevator frame. The body stopped moving. The pumps went silent. Upstairs, the survivor signals remained active. I looked at the Corpse King and waited for the reward choice system to confirm the clear. The system stayed silent. The exit remained closed. No reward appeared. The Corpse King hit the basement floor in pieces. The dungeon still refused to call itself cleared. I waited 1 second for the reward choice system. Nothing appeared. The exit stayed sealed. The survival timer kept moving. Then the elevator shaft coughed up a zombie. It dropped through the dust, struck the broken car, and rolled into the basement. 3 more bodies followed. Then 10. The Corpse King had been dead for less than a minute, and Dead City had already started raining replacements. One landed on the blonde survivor and drove her beneath the wreckage. I crossed the room with Gale's step, cut the zombie through the spine, and dragged her out by the collar. She stared at the ceiling. Was that the boss's second phase? The boss is in 2 pieces. This is somebody else's complaint. Black roots snapped loose from the Corpse King's lower half. They did not dry. They pulled themselves across the floor toward a maintenance hatch beneath the ruined elevator. That movement answered the useful part. Something below had controlled the building. The Corpse King had only guarded it. More zombies fell. Derek fired from the service stair doorway with his uninjured arm. His bandage darkened around the shoulder wound each time the rifle kicked. I pointed toward the upper landing. Get everyone above the waterline. Seal the stair door after the last person. Derek looked at the flooded basement, then at me. You planning to throw me again? Only if you volunteer slowly. Derek backed up another step. That sounded like a yes. He retreated up the stairs while firing. The survivors followed him instead of debating. The blonde survivor stopped long enough to kick the maintenance hatch open for me, then ran after the group. Sewage water surged through the gap. Roots disappeared into the darkness below. I followed them. Under the basement, a narrow service tunnel ran beside the tower's pump lines. Red emergency lights flickered over water already climbing past my boots. Every time the pumps thudded, the roots along the pipes tightened. A steel door slammed shut ahead of me. The lights dimmed at the same instant. Then a drainage pipe behind me split open and dumped 3 fresh zombies into the tunnel. Pumps! Doors! Sewage! Electricity! The same root network touched all 4. I cut the first zombie, drove the second into the wall, and let the third rush past my shoulder. Fangbreaker entered through the back of its skull before it reached the ladder. The hatch above slammed shut behind me. A root wrapped around its wheel and twisted until the metal bent. Derek could not follow even if his shoulder suddenly developed a work ethic. The tunnel water changed direction. Instead of draining toward the chamber, it rushed back at me. A loose tool cart shot past my knees and struck the sealed hatch hard enough to buckle one side. The roots controlled the pumps and chose where the building flooded. I drove Fangbreaker into a pipe brace and climbed over the surge. The water carried 2 more bodies beneath me. One caught my boot. I kicked free, dropped behind it, and removed the head before the current pushed both halves toward the hatch. The steel door ahead bulged outward. A pale root punched through it. Then the whole door tore free. The chamber beyond had once distributed water through the tower. Now a swollen plant filled the center pit. Its trunk had grown around the main pipes, while black roots entered every wall. Human bodies hung between the branches, drained and still. A pale core pulsed behind layers of wet bark. The mother plant attacked before I could admire the plumbing. 2 tentacles swept the tunnel from opposite sides. I ducked beneath the first and cut through the second. Black sap sealed the wound before the severed length hit the water. The first tentacle curled around my ankle. It ripped me from the pipe brace and threw me through the chamber entrance. Greyhide kept the floor from opening my ribs. The impact still stole my breath and sent Fangbreaker skidding toward the central pit. 3 root pods split above me. Half-formed zombies fell out wearing pieces of professional armor. One had no face yet. Another dragged a leg still connected to the pod by a black cord. The mother plant did not need a summoning speech. It had inventory. I rolled beneath the first bite, caught Fangbreaker, and cut the cord behind the faceless body. The zombie collapsed immediately. The second kept moving after I removed its head. Roots inside the torso pulled it forward like a broken puppet. I cut the roots instead. The body dropped. That told me what mattered. The plant could replace flesh faster than I could destroy it, but every replacement stayed connected to the same network. I ran along the rim of the pit and drove Fangbreaker into the trunk. The blade entered only a few inches. The bark opened around it. New fibers pushed the sword outward while 4 roots struck from the walls. I released the hilt, let the first root pass, then caught the sword again as the second wrapped my waist. The root tightened hard enough to make Greyhide bite into my bruised ribs. A third tendril knocked my legs out. The fourth dragged Fangbreaker away from the trunk and flung me into the flooded floor. Direct damage had failed. The chamber filled faster. Pumps hammered beneath the water. Every cycle swelled the trunk and pushed black fluid through the root lines. Another pod opened. Then 2 more. I cut one replacement body and watched the wound close through the pipe behind it. The boss was using the building as blood vessels. Great. I had killed a corpse king with an elevator. Infrastructure had officially become my preferred weapon class. I moved toward the far wall while the mother plant closed the lane behind me. The roots expected another attack on the core. I gave them one. I drove gale step through the water, crossed the first sweep, and struck the pale seam behind the bark. The plant pulled every nearby root inward. The seam vanished beneath a layered shield. A pressure wave hit me from below. The flooded floor rose like a fist and threw me into a pump housing. My left shoulder struck metal. The arm went numb for half a second. The mother plant opened all 12 pale eyes along its trunk. It had numbers, terrain, replacements, and a face designed by a committee that hated sleep. I had one room full of water and one increasingly bad idea. A metal cabinet beside the pumps still hummed. Green indicator lights glowed behind a cracked panel. The power distribution box was live. Every time the plant moved, the pumps accelerated. Every time a root struck, the cabinet lights dipped. The dungeon had wired its true boss into the same system, keeping the tower alive. I cut the cabinet doorway. The mother plant reacted immediately. 4 roots abandoned the core and raced toward the exposed box. That was the answer. The plant replaced flesh freely. Power remained its protected artery. I stepped between the roots and the cabinet. The first tendril struck high. I blocked with Fangbreaker and let the second wrap around my waist. It tightened hard enough to make Greyhide grind against my ribs. I waited until every attacking root touched the wet floor. Then I cut the main cable free without grounding the blade. The insulated section landed in my left hand. The severed end spat white sparks. The plant yanked me toward the core. I threw the live end into the root bundle. Electricity crossed the water in one violent flash. Every root in the chamber locked straight. The zombies convulsed and collapsed. The mother plant screamed through the pipes. Lights blew out floor by floor above us. The cable kicked from my grip and burned through the armor at my palm. My left arm went numb. The plant still moved. Of course it did. Dead City had never accepted the first solution politely. The outer roots split apart and exposed a pale core behind them. A final tentacle tore free from the ceiling and drove toward my head. I forced gale step through the cramp in my legs. The strike missed by inches and shattered the cabinet. I crossed the wet floor while the current still held the smaller roots rigid. One zombie rose between me and the core. I cut through its shoulder without stopping. The mother plant pulled the pale core backward. Too late. Fangbreaker entered the opening created by the overload. My level 3 sword technique held the line through the shaking in my left hand. I cut the core in half. The entire chamber contracted. Pumps stopped. Doors released. Black roots peeled from the walls and dried into brittle cords. The last hanging body dropped empty onto the floor. Only after the mother plant stopped moving did the reward choice system appear. Dead City cleared. First perfect clear recorded. Survival timer overridden by hidden source elimination. There it was. The missing rule had finally paid in blood and electricity. The chamber floor shook again, but the movement had changed. Roots crumbled instead of tightening. Water stopped climbing. Somewhere above, steel doors released in a chain of heavy impacts. The system pulled the surviving entrance into the reward chamber. Derek appeared beside the blonde survivor, still pale from his shoulder wound. The medical spray had sealed the surface, but blood had worked through the bandage again. Perfect clears apparently came without free orthopedic care. Derek looked at the timer disappearing above us. We just beat a 3-day trial before lunch. I had a house appointment. The blonde survivor moved to Derek's injured side without being ordered. 10 minutes earlier she had been waiting for my next command. Now she started helping before I spoke. 3 chests formed across the floor. 2 glowed rare blue. The center chest burned epic purple. I gestured toward Derek and the blonde survivor. Choose first! The blonde survivor moved first. Her hand reached toward the epic lid. I rested Fangbreaker across my shoulder and looked at her. That was all. She studied the wet blood on my armor, the burned glove, and the sword that had just ended 2 bosses. Her hand changed direction with impressive professional development. The rare chest fits my build better, she announced. Derek glanced at her. Your build improved quickly. I respect specialization. Derek took the second rare chest and braced it against his uninjured side. I nodded. Since both of you are being so courteous, I will endure the epic chest. The blonde survivor hugged her rare chest and avoided eye contact. Public loot division had never been this efficient. The epic lid opened. Only I saw the full selection screen. The first eligible object was a legendary musket, heavy black metal, silver mechanisms, enough market value to make my house debt stop looking immortal. I selected it. 2 ordinary choices remained, but the perfect clear added a separate rule. I could keep 2 more high-grade objects, or surrender those slots for eligible hidden traits taken from enemies defeated in this clear. The cost appeared before the choice. The eligible traits included the Corpse King's sensory network and the Mother Plant's command function. Every trait in the menu came from a boss I had killed. I traded both remaining equipment slots. Borrowed sight acquired. The skill could search for a nearby living creature and borrow its senses for a limited feed. Mind command acquired. The trait came from the Mother Plant's control mechanism. Its practical limits remained untested. I left it that way. Testing mind control on wounded survivors would have been efficient, informative, and deeply stupid. Derek watched the legendary musket settle into my hands. Derek nodded toward it. You cleared the worst trial in Harbor City and chose a gun. I chose a mortgage payment with a trigger. Derek adjusted his bandage. That may be the most warrior thing you have said. Derek glanced at the Sleep Forge notice waiting below the new skills. Does sleeping attack you harder now too? Apparently my benefits package includes hostile rest. The new sensory skill activated before I dismissed it. My vision snapped sideways. For one breath, I was low to the ground inside a sewer conduit. A rat scrambled over wet concrete beneath the pump chamber. Its eyes caught a metal casing wrapped around one of the dead root lines. A geometric symbol had been stamped into the casing, 3 broken angles around a black center. The shape did not belong to the building, the reward screen, or any Dead City marker I had seen. I traced it into the grime beside my boot before the rat moved. The reward choice system flickered. Static tore across the borrowed feed. The rat froze. Something beyond its view clicked once. Then, borrowed sight cut out. My normal vision returned inside the reward chamber. The traced mark remained under my hand. Derek noticed my expression. Bad news? Expensive news. I followed the rat's last direction before the exit opened. Behind the generator housing, I found the same stamped casing buried beneath dead roots. The system stayed silent. The mark carried no owner. The casing gave me one clean suspicion: someone had installed the mother plant. I still did not know who. The final clear reward settled. Professional level, 4. Basic sword technique, level 4. Sleep Forge, level 2. Gale Step, level 2. Borrowed sight and mind. Command remained at level 1. Derek looked from my old badge to the level display and whistled. Derek pointed at the display. You entered at level 2. I enjoy promotions with unreasonable working conditions. The dungeon exit opened behind us. I kept mind command unused, stored the mark in memory, and listed the legendary musket before my boots reached Harbor City pavement. The first bid arrived almost immediately. $5 million finally looked reachable. The same loot that could save my house was valuable enough to make the wrong people follow me. The morning after Dead City, I became a millionaire long enough to save my house. By lunch, my card declined. The profitable part started on a private sales floor in Harbor City. The legendary musket rested inside a clear security case, while buyers watched from behind numbered partitions. I had listed it before leaving the dungeon. The highest bid had stopped at $3 million overnight. Then a man with a trimmed mustache raised it to 3.6. Nobody answered. The sale closed. An attendant unlocked the case only after the buyer's transfer cleared. I watched the full amount enter my account before I released the weapon. $3,600,000 received. Added to the $1.4 million I had forced from the skillbook buyer, the total reached exactly $5 million. The house debt and my available money finally matched. The mustached buyer tested the musket's balance without pointing it at anyone. His 2 guards watched me instead of the merchandise. You are Evan Cole, the buyer said. That depends on whether you plan to pay again. The buyer tapped the cleared transfer. The money is complete. Then we have reached the friendly part of the transaction. His expression did not improve. The buyer lowered his voice. A level 4 warrior should not be walking out of Dead City with legendary equipment, yet here I am. Terrible week for expectations. The buyer's gaze moved from my badge to the empty case. Items like this do not fall into hands like yours by accident. I looked at the transfer confirmation. Are you buying the gun or conducting a personality interview? The buyer closed the security case. I already bought it. Then mind the part you own. One guard stepped closer. The buyer raised 2 fingers and stopped him. He had the weapon. I had the money. Neither of us needed a second robbery lesson. I left before the buyer asked another question. At my house, the creditor had arrived with 3 men, empty crates, a portable drill, and the red seizure tag still nailed across the door. The drill was already on the front step. He looked at my bruised armor and smiled. You came back just in time to watch. One of his men pressed the bit against the lock plate. The motor started. I caught the drill housing with my armored right hand before the bit reached the cylinder. The machine screamed against my grip. The worker released it and stepped backward. I switched it off and placed it inside the nearest empty crate. Nothing enters that door until the number is settled. The creditor glanced at the sword on my hip. Threatening a collection crew will not erase the debt. I brought something better than a threat. I opened the payment screen. 5 million, I told the creditor. Full principal, right now. His smile remained for half a second after the number appeared. Then it slipped. He checked the account twice. I let him. The second look did not make me poorer. The full transfer left my account. The creditor's screen changed from red to settled. His grip loosened on the seizure tag. I took it from his hand, tore it in half, and dropped both pieces into one of his empty crates. The men beside the door looked at the drill. Then they looked at me. The creditor waved them back toward their vehicle. I pointed at the matching strip still stuck across the doorframe. You brought that here. Remove it. His jaw tightened. The neighbors who had watched the tag go up were watching from 2 windows across the street. He saw them too. The creditor peeled the strip away 1 inch at a time. The adhesive fought harder than his collection crew. One worker reached for an old notice taped beside the window. Take all of them, I said. Your decorations are ugly. The crew removed every red paper, stacked them in the empty crate, and carried the drill back to the vehicle. They had arrived ready to empty the house. They left with their own paperwork. The creditor stopped at the sidewalk. You have no reserve left. I looked at the settled screen. You no longer own the problem. His mouth opened. The sword on my hip persuaded him to preserve the thought for private use. The vehicle drove away with every crate still empty. I unlocked the front door myself. The house smelled like dust, old wood, and a life I had inherited without permission. Original Evan's memories had kept returning to this hallway whenever the debt came up. He had failed at plenty of things. He had still fought to keep this place. The lock turned cleanly. For one quiet breath, the building belonged to Evan Cole without a red tag attached. Then I checked my balance. Fees, food, medical supplies, and the final transfer had left me with just over $200. I had saved a $5 million house and become too poor for a celebratory lunch. Capitalism had excellent combo timing. At a diner near the transit station, I ordered the cheapest full meal and placed my payment card on the reader. The screen turned red. Payment declined. I checked the balance again. A hold from the sales floor had eaten the last available amount until settlement completed. The server looked from the declined card to the sword under my coat. Do you have another method? She asked. I have a house, she waited. Unfortunately, it is difficult to tap against the reader. I canceled the order before hunger became a public financing round and walked outside. Across the street, the musket buyer's 2 guards were pretending to study a transit map. One held it upside down. The rare seller had left the sales floor broke enough to fail a meal payment. They had decided that made me easy. Low cash had not removed Fangbreaker, Greyhide, or the part of my personality that charged customer service fees. I entered the station and took the cheapest bus heading east. Both guards boarded through different doors. The first sat near the driver and used the glass partition to watch the aisle. The second remained 3 rows behind me with a newspaper open to the same page for 5 stops. Subtlety had not survived their hiring process. I changed seats when an older passenger left. The rear guard changed too. I moved again when the bus stopped. He followed 1 beat later. The front guard never looked back directly. He watched my reflection in the route display. They were not planning an attack on public transit. They wanted a clean location, confirmation that I carried no other legendary item, and a route back to their buyer if I became cooperative. I became cooperative with the wrong objective. At the next stop, I stood before the doors opened. The rear guard stood too. I sat again. He remained standing while every passenger looked at him. A child offered him the empty seat. The guard declined with the dignity of a man losing a surveillance operation to public manners. I moved to the back, waited until the first guard watched the reflection in the window, then left through the rear door at the next stop. The second guard followed. The first stayed on the bus to cover the route. I crossed a crowded market, bought 1 bottle of water with the coins in my pocket, and dropped the empty bottle into a recycling bin beside an alley. The second guard saw the bottle, saw the narrow lane, and accelerated. I used Gale's step once behind a delivery truck, reached the fire stairs, and climbed to the roof before he entered the alley. From above, I watched him search behind a dumpster with the concentration of a man whose promotion depended on finding hydration evidence. The first guard returned from the bus 3 minutes later. They argued beside the bin. One pointed east, the other pointed west. Neither looked up. I sent the buyer a message from the rooftop. Your guards lost the merchandise. The merchandise is me. Stop wasting payroll. The reply came after a long pause. Understood. Both guards received calls at the same time. Their posture changed. They left without another search. The tale had cost me 1 bus fare, 1 bottle, and enough calf pain to remind me that Gale's step still sent the bill to my body. Official work suddenly looked attractive. Paid contracts created a reason for valuable equipment, public results, and people seeing me without immediately planning a warehouse robbery. A zone response agency advertisement played on a screen above the station. External professionals wanted. Emergency response. Contract rates by threat. The lowest tier barely covered ammunition. The highest tier could refill my account before dinner. I followed the address. The agency hall looked like every government building had agreed to wear combat armor. Reinforced glass separated the reception desk from a waiting area full of professionals. Emergency maps covered one wall. A public incident dashboard cycled through recent gray zone alerts. A contractor beside the door was arguing over hazard pay. Another carried 3 recommendation letters and still had not reached the desk. The room had enough credentials to build a fort and not one visible emergency. I walked past the application shelves. The receptionist pointed at them. External applicants complete the record packet first. I am applying for the rate after the packet becomes irrelevant. That is not a service category. It will be today. A man in polished armor looked up from his forms. You skipped the queue. I am trying to save you time. Your paperwork looked committed to a long relationship. The woman beside him laughed. He returned to page 6 with wounded dignity. I placed my level 4 card on the counter. The receptionist looked at the class line first. Warrior. Her expression completed the rest of the evaluation without needing paperwork. Perimeter cleanup is available, she said. Low exposure. Hourly pay. She slid a notice toward me with one finger. I want the highest external rate. The receptionist looked past me for the person who had made the joke. Nobody claimed it. Then she smiled like I had told her I owned the moon. A woman beside the public incident dashboard turned toward us. She was Deputy Director Helen Ward, the agency executive controlling external emergency contracts that afternoon. Her field jacket carried command markings, and everyone near the desk lowered their voice when she approached. Helen glanced at my level, class, and weapon. You want our highest rate? Helen asked. I want the rate you pay after the cheaper people fail. The waiting professionals laughed harder. One man pointed at the cleanup notice. Take the safe work, kid. I looked at his polished armor. You first. It seems emotionally compatible. His friends laughed at him instead. The man folded the notice and stopped offering career guidance. Helen folded her arms and gave one short laugh. On what record? I looked past her at the public dashboard. The screen showed recent gray zone emergencies across Harbor City. 3 outbreaks had formed near powered drainage routes. Their timestamps were irregular, but the locations advanced toward Central Plaza in a clean line. One incident had begun beside a pumping station. Another had split a service tunnel. The newest had forced an evacuation from a block connected to the plaza's underground utilities. A random cluster could happen. Dead City had shown me a monster threaded through infrastructure, plus a stamped casing that suggested deliberate placement. The public map made the same possibility harder to dismiss above ground. I kept the mark and the system out of my explanation. The visible locations were enough to make a falsifiable claim. I walked to the dashboard and touched Central Plaza. This area gets hit today. The receptionist covered another laugh. Helen studied the screen. Gray zones appear without warning. Your recent ones keep walking toward the same target. A bystander leaned toward his friend. The warrior predicts maps now. I checked the time on the dashboard and gave Helen a window before the next incident marker would become impossible to hide. Write down what I said. When the alarm sounds, call me. Helen's expression sharpened. And if it does not, I leave with the same badge you already dislike. And if it does, my price goes up. The receptionist shook her head. You came here asking for work. I came here before you knew you needed me. That is more expensive. I turned toward the exit. The lobby still sounded amused behind me. I reached the front doors. Every emergency panel in the hall turned red. A siren cut through the laughter. The public dashboard flashed one location. Central Plaza. Helen's hand stopped above her radio. The receptionist stared at the point I had touched. A live street camera filled the main screen. A withered blood vine tore through the pavement, wrapped civilians alive, and pulled them toward a mass of roots under the square. Helen turned toward the response corridor. Mobilize the field team. Find Evan Cole before he leaves. I looked back from the doors. You found him. The people who had laughed were already calling my name. By the time I reached Central Plaza, the Zone Response Agency's field team was losing an argument with a plant. The withered blood vine had split the pavement across half the square, its trunk twisted around the fountain, and its roots had wrapped civilians against walls, light poles, and overturned cars. Special rounds struck the bark and flattened. Police had pushed the crowd behind 2 barricades, but roots kept tunneling beneath both lines. Every time an officer fired, another branch surfaced closer to the civilians. The response was spending ammunition and losing ground at the same time. A class-enhanced officer emptied his last magazine into one knot. The bark cracked just enough to show darker wood underneath, then sealed over the damage. Another officer rushed a trapped man. The ground moved first. A root hit the officer across the chest and threw him behind the barricade. Claire Hart dragged him clear before the next strike landed. She was the agency field officer holding the plaza line until reinforcements arrived, which currently meant stopping brave people from feeding themselves to landscaping. Claire shoved the injured officer toward a medic and raised her radio. Ammunition is almost gone, Claire reported. Close rescue failed. We still have civilians alive inside the root field. The vine ripped a street sign from the ground and swung it toward her. I crossed the barricade with Gale's step. Fangbreaker cut the attacking branch in one pass. The severed length hit the pavement behind me. Claire looked at the clean cut, then at the special rounds still buried in the bark. "You are the warrior from the lobby," Claire said. "The expensive one." A second branch came from my right. I turned the blade, shaved through its outer layer, and redirected the heavier trunk over my shoulder. The impact still drove my armor into my ribs. Level 8 described the amount of danger. Physics still applied. Claire stepped closer. "This area is under agency control. Interfering here can get civilians killed." I cut another tendril before it reached a trapped woman. "Can your line hold until the full response team arrives?" Claire watched 3 roots climb over the barricade. "Maybe 2 minutes. Then your control expires in 2 minutes. Her jaw tightened. I pointed Fangbreaker toward the main trunk. "I am the only person here cutting it. My help has terms." Claire stared at me. "You're negotiating now? Your plant is still billing civilians." The vine slammed both sides of the street at once. Claire ducked behind an overturned car while I cut the branch crossing above her. I kept my voice clear enough for her radio. $1 million, top-rate external contractor status, paid after the rescue. Claire's eyes widened. "You asked for the highest rate before this started." "That was the prediction price. This is the live demonstration." Deputy Director Helen Ward answered over Claire's radio. "Evan Cole," Helen called. "Field pressure estimates the target at level 8. A full team would normally handle this. Will you bear the consequence if your claim fails?" The woman who had laughed in the lobby no longer sounded amused. "Good. Now we could discuss numbers like adults." I blocked a root with the flat of Fangbreaker and let it push me 3 steps across the pavement. "If I fail, my life settles the account." Helen went quiet. I drove the blade down and cut the root, pinning the trapped woman. "If I succeed, the agency pays the $1 million and puts me on the highest contractor rate." Claire looked toward the civilians. "Deputy Director?" Helen answered through the radio. "Terms recorded." That was enough. A child's scream cut across the square. A little girl had slipped from her mother's arms near the barricade. She ran 3 steps toward open pavement. The vine had no clear view of her through the smoke and broken cars. It reacted anyway. A root erupted beneath her feet, wrapped her waist, and pulled her toward a split in the ground. Her mother caught one hand. The root tightened. Claire sprinted forward. A wall of thinner vines struck the pavement between them and forced her back. The mother's grip broke. The girl disappeared into the root field. I had seen the same timing twice. The vine turned before footsteps reached it. Bullets produced reactions at the point of impact. Running produced reactions underground before the trunk moved. Its sensor network lived below the square. I threw a broken cartridge case 10 feet to my left. The case hit the pavement once. 3 underground roots chased the vibration. That was the rule. I activated borrowed sight and searched the nearby living feeds. A sewer rat beneath a food kiosk answered. My vision dropped into a narrow service pipe. Through the rat's eyes, pale root feelers pressed against the concrete from every direction. Each tremor above sent a ripple through them toward the main trunk. The plant did not need eyes. The underground feelers read vibration and told the larger body where to strike. The rat turned. One thick root was carrying the girl toward the fountain's foundation. I released the feed and faced Claire. "Stop firing. Every impact gives it a target." Claire looked at the vine, then at the officers with their last magazines raised. She made the choice immediately. "Hold fire," Claire ordered. "Clear the west side. Move the injured without running." The plaza changed shape around that command. Gunfire stopped. Roots that had been predicting every impact hesitated. I tossed 3 empty casings across the east lane in sequence. The first hit near a light pole. The second struck an overturned cart. The third bounced beneath the fountain. Underground roots chased each sound. I crossed the silent lane behind them. Controlled gale step felt different from the warehouse burst. I used only enough speed to land between the vibrations instead of creating one long target line. The first feeler surfaced beside my left boot. I cut it. 2 more rows where the casing had landed instead of where I stood. I cut the second network line and followed the root carrying the girl. The trunk sensed the missing feelers. A heavy root came from behind and struck my back. Greyhide prevented penetration. It did not negotiate with momentum. I crossed the hood of a parked car, hit the windshield, and landed on the far side with my ribs ringing. Claire moved to help. "Stay quiet," I told her. "That was not quiet." The plant started it. A smaller tendril wrapped my right ankle. I let it pull once, marked the direction, and cut through it near the ground. Black fluid sprayed from the severed end and ran toward the fountain. Every sensing line fed the same buried knot beneath the main trunk. The girl was moving toward it. I opened borrowed sight again. The first rat had fled. A second living feed answered from beneath a broken bakery cart. The view dropped low beside a slab of cracked concrete. The girl lay beneath it with one arm pinned. A thick root had wrapped her coat and was dragging both her and the slab toward an open trench. Another feeler waited above her chest. I released the feed. "Claire, throw 1 cartridge behind the fountain." Claire understood without asking for a briefing. She pulled an empty casing from the pavement and threw it hard. The casing struck stone. Every nearby feeler turned. I drove gale step through both cramping calves and reached the trench before the waiting root corrected. The slab had begun sliding. I dropped between the root and the girl. The strike hit Greyhide across my shoulder and drove me onto one knee. The armor held. My right hand went numb around Fangbreaker. The girl stared at the dent forming inches above her face. "Close your eyes," I told her. She did. I cut the root around her coat, lifted the slab with my armored shoulder, and pulled her free. Another tendril entered the trench. I threw the girl upward. Claire caught her at the edge. The girl grabbed Claire's jacket and refused to let go. Claire looked down at me. "I have her." "Good, 6 more." The nearest officers had assumed the child was the rescue. The other hostages were still tied to a monster that now knew I understood it. I climbed from the trench and moved back into the root field. The vine closed the easy lanes. A trapped man hung beside the fountain. 2 women were pinned against an overturned vehicle. 3 civilians remained behind the split pavement near the main trunk. I used casings, broken glass, and one deliberately kicked sign to pull the feelers away from each route. Claire changed the field around me instead of merely watching. She ordered medics to crawl, officers to drag shields rather than carry them, and every radio lowered to vibration mode. The first hostage came free when I cut the root at its ground joint. The freed man tried running. The feelers turned beneath him before his second step. Claire caught his coat and pulled him down. "Crawl!" He crawled! The root passed over his back and struck the pavement where his feet had been. The second root tried replacing the first. Claire rolled a metal shield into the opposite lane. The impact drew the replacement away. "Useful," I told her. "Add it to the invoice." I cut 2 more restraints. One woman had a root around each wrist. Cutting the first made the second tighten. I placed the flat of Fangbreaker beneath the second loop, lifted to keep pressure off the joint, and cut both at the shared base. She dropped into my arms. A third feeler rose beneath us. I threw her toward Claire and took the hit across Greyhide. The impact turned my right hand numb again and drove the armor edge against an already bruised rib. Claire caught the woman with one arm and fired her radio with the other. Medic lane 2, no running. The officers behind the barricade stopped treating my movement as spectacle and began copying the rules. Shields slid instead of slammed. Injured people crawled, radios stayed quiet. Every changed behavior removed 1 vibration target from the plant. The 5th hostage was pinned behind a car door. Mason's team could see him but not reach him. I cut the root holding the vehicle, let the door fall as a shield, and dragged the man through the gap before the replacement line surfaced. The 6th had stopped responding. I found a pulse, cut the restraint, and pushed him toward the medics on the fallen door. Claire met my eyes across the field. 1 left. The vine abandoned subtlety. The vine abandoned subtlety. Its main trunk split open and drove a cluster of roots through the square. 1 caught me across the armor and pushed me against the fountain. Another wrapped the last trapped woman and lifted her in front of the pale central knot. Living shield. The root placed her directly across my only clean line. The woman could hear the trunk opening behind her. She stopped struggling because every movement made the feelers tighten. I could not cut through her. I could make the monster move her. I struck Fangbreaker against the fountain rim once. The root shield turned toward the sound. Claire threw a casing to the opposite side. The sensing knot corrected again. For half a second, the woman moved away from the trunk, and the buried feelers crossed beneath one another. There. I cut the 2 crossing lines. The woman dropped. Claire's officer caught her before she hit the ground. The pale knot beneath the trunk opened without its sensing shield. The vine reacted by pulling every loose root toward the fountain. Pavement folded upward. The fountain bowl cracked, and water burst across the square. The new water carried vibration in every direction. My own steps multiplied through the flooded stone. The plant had turned the solution into another sensor surface. I stopped moving. Claire saw the shift and stopped her team too. For one breath, the whole plaza held still while water ran around our boots. The vine searched the ripples and found only its own roots moving. I dropped Fangbreaker's sheath into the water beside the main trunk. Every feeler tightened toward that one impact. I stepped through the quiet lane they had abandoned. I used the first cut to split the bark. The second severed the buried feeler bundle. The third separated the entire trunk from the root mass. The vine collapsed across the square. Every remaining restraint loosened. I caught the final hostage before she hit the pavement and carried her to Claire's side of the barricade. The little girl saw her mother and ran. Her mother dropped to her knees and pulled her in with both arms. The girl buried her face against her shoulder. For one quiet second, the square had a result worth more than my invoice. Then I returned to the invoice. Claire looked from the dead vine to my level 4 badge. "Are you really a warrior? I have suffered the customer service, so yes." She glanced at the dent in Greyhide and the hand I kept flexing to restore feeling. "You made that look easier than it was. Please repeat that near the payment officer." Claire raised her radio. "All hostages recovered. Target destroyed by Evan Cole. Keep the amount exactly as recorded." That line turned my private bargain into the field team's public position. Helen's voice came through the radio. Payment and contractor placement are authorized. An agency officer brought me a secured payment card from the command vehicle. $1 million received. A second notice appeared beneath it. Zone Response Agency, top-rate external professional. The officers who had watched special rounds fail moved when I gave them a path through the dead roots. Claire used the opening to send medics to every freed hostage. The rescue changed field behavior before anyone had time to write a flattering report. That was how status should work. An hour later, inside the agency lobby, the same receptionist approached me with a black contractor badge and a cup of coffee. She placed both on the counter without mentioning the cleanup notice she had offered earlier. The professionals who had laughed were watching the plaza feed replay above the desk. One moved out of my way before I reached him. Another suddenly found the floor fascinating. The receptionist cleared her throat. Highest rate access is active. She slid the badge toward me with both hands. Earlier, one finger had been enough to push my level 4 card away. The rescue had apparently upgraded her grip strength. Good. The coffee almost makes the mockery look planned. The man who had told me to take safe cleanup work stood from his chair. He opened his mouth, considered the rescue replay, and chose a silent nod instead. Professional development had reached the lobby too. Claire entered from the field entrance with dust on her jacket and one torn sleeve. She had the calm stare of a woman who had spent the afternoon making panic obey. In my defense, the look was winning the argument. Claire glanced at the payment card in my hand. Do you invoice during every rescue? Emergencies are when clients finally stop negotiating badly. Her mouth twitched. That was almost charming, Claire told me. Added to the contractor record. The badge activated against my phone. Before the coffee cooled, a new assignment loaded onto the screen. 3 contractor identities were blacked out. The attached target image carried 3 broken angles around a black center. The agency finally put me on its highest paid list. The next assignment arrived with 3 redacted names and the same mark I had seen under Dead City. The following day, Claire called from 6th Street Elementary. The marked order had sent 3 outside professionals toward the same emergency, yet every identity line remained black until arrival. My badge opened the assignment channel. It did not explain why somebody had arranged the meeting. The order carried no target description beyond priority zone contact. 1 redacted identity had been tagged for combat, 1 for observation, 1 for support. The roles were visible, the names were not. That structure guaranteed 3 strangers would arrive expecting different versions of the same event. Somebody wanted friction before the monster appeared. I accepted anyway. A probable trap was still paid work, and whoever had stamped Dead City had already started choosing my schedule. Ignoring the order would not make the chooser disappear, it would only leave me broke somewhere less informative. Inside the gray fog, 1 block from the school, Claire stood beside an evacuation bus and a field specialist named Mason Reed. Mason carried a treatment case, barrier foam, and the expression of a man who had already used both too often. The first patrol had heard metal beneath the road and followed it. The second had found their dropped radios and followed those. Both mistakes used the same bait, official equipment moving where civilians had already cleared. The school buses gave the underground target a louder prize. Mason had already placed foam markers along the evacuation route. Every marker that trembled gave us another piece of the underground path. He had no spectacular combat power. He turned a treatment tool into a moving sensor line because children were walking above the threat. That was the kind of support role people ignored until it kept a bus from vanishing. Claire met me beside the last loading lane. Yesterday you predicted Central Plaza. Today your new badge sends you to a marked emergency with 2 hidden partners. 3 hidden identities, I corrected. One of them was mine until I arrived. That does not answer how you knew. I saw powered infrastructure being used as a monster body inside Dead City. Then the public incidents moved along the same kind of routes. Claire watched my face. You think the zones are being placed. I think some of them are being manufactured. That is still a hypothesis. And this order? I showed her the geometric mark. Claire's expression lost the last trace of plaza banter. Same symbol? Same bad taste. Metal scraped beneath the street. The nearest foam marker twitched. Claire pointed toward the next intersection. Movement under the road. 2 patrols went down without seeing a target. The pavement looked empty. Dust sat around a broken hydrant. Water leaked into the gutter. A streetlight leaned toward the school. The dust around its base trembled every few seconds. I knelt beside the pole. Mason watched me touch the pavement. What do you see? Something using the utility line. Claire lifted her radio. The bus is still loading. Release it now. We have 6 students crossing from the West Hall. Load them through the east door and move. The pole is marking their route. Claire did not move. Yesterday, she had changed fire orders after I proved the vibration rule. Today, a school bus was involved, and my evidence was 1 shaking streetlight. Fair objection. I pointed at the 3rd streetlight from the intersection. 5 seconds, I said. That one will shake once, then the brake will open behind the bus, not beneath the pole. Mason checked the foam markers. Claire started counting. 1, 2, 3. The 3rd streetlight shook exactly once. A crack opened beneath the bus's rear wheel. Claire changed the order before the 5th second finished. Driver, move! East Hall group runs to the next bus. Mason, clear the lane. Evan has field lead until the route changes. The bus accelerated before the crack widened. A horn punched through the pavement where its fuel tank had been. The horn did not rise randomly. It corrected toward the exact vibration line of the moving bus. Mason saw the same thing and changed his position without waiting for another order. He moved the crossing students behind the hydrant wall and opened a foam lane toward the second bus. A small clue had already changed 3 people's survival path. The children screamed from inside the moving vehicle. The driver kept going. Mason spread field foam across the opening. The surface hardened for 2 seconds before a black shell broke through it. A beetle the size of a city bus climbed into the intersection. The beetle shook off the foam and drove one horn through a parked van. I cut across the horn base. Fangbreaker opened a silver line and stopped. The shell was denser than the vine bark and layered in overlapping plates. My blade could enter. It could not pass through the whole body in one clean strike. The beetle swung its head. I released the horn and let the impact throw me toward the curb instead of under its feet. Greyhide caught the van door when I hit it. The metal folded around my back. The beetle turned toward the bus again. Mason fired barrier foam into the cracked pavement beneath its right legs. The hardened strip held 1 step. That was enough. I cut the front joint and forced the body sideways. The bus cleared the intersection. The beetle drove its remaining horn into the road and disappeared beneath the pavement again. That was worse than keeping it visible. Mason checked the foam markers. 3 trembled near the first bus route. 2 remained still beside the East Hall. Second bus moves on my count, I told him. Claire did not ask why. The streetlight proof had already bought the next decision. I struck Fangbreaker against the curb once. The nearest foam markers shook toward me. The underground body followed the vibration instead of the idling bus. Move, I ordered. The second bus accelerated. The beetle erupted beneath the sound I had created and found only my armored legs above it. Its horn caught Greyhide and lifted me onto the hood of a parked car. I drove Fangbreaker between 2 head plates before it could throw me. The blade did not reach a core. It gave Mason a fixed point. Mason fired foam around the embedded sword and sealed the plates together for 1 second. Claire used that second to move the West Hall students across the lane. The beetle tore free. The foam snapped. Fangbreaker remained in my hand. The last student crossed before the horn struck the empty pavement behind him. Mason looked at the destroyed foam cartridge. That was the last full canister. Then the next solution has to be cheaper. Claire's voice hit every field radio. Civilian route remains priority. Evan calls the target. A second vehicle entered the fog from the north. It was not a school bus. 6 armored trucks rolled into the lane wearing Apex Guild insignia. Their doors opened before the convoy stopped, and a team in matching black and gold armor stepped into the street. Grant Pike came first. Grant was the adult strike leader of Apex Guild, a man with polished equipment, carefully arranged hair, and the confidence of someone whose team had practiced arriving after the evacuation work was mostly done. He looked at the beetle, then at my warrior badge. A level 4 warrior has field lead? Grant asked. Claire answered before I could. He earned it. Grant's gaze moved to the cut at the horn joint. A shallow mark is not a command qualification. I climbed out of the folded van door. Matching armor is not a personality. One Apex fighter coughed into his fist. Grant ignored him. Apex received the exclusive claim, fixed equipment drop. Our guild takes the target and the reward. The beetle drove its horn through the foam and threw hardened pieces across the street. Mason raised his case to shield 2 students. An Apex fighter caught the larger fragment before it hit him. Useful reflex. Terrible boss. Grant drew a heavy weapon and pointed toward the shell. Stay behind my line, warrior. We will finish this cleanly. One Apex fighter looked at the cut around the horn base. He already redirected it twice. Grant answered without looking at him. A shallow cut and a lucky prediction do not change class limits. The fighter stopped talking, but he did not stop looking at the evacuated buses. Grant's team had arrived expecting a loot operation. The road kept showing them a rescue. Mason dragged one damaged foam marker away from the crack. Grant watched him struggle and said, "Support stays outside the strike radius." Mason kept pulling. "The strike radius currently includes a school." Claire hid a smile behind her radio. Grant's jaw tightened. The 3 people he had expected to rank beneath him were now working around his announcement while the beetle continued attacking. "Your line is standing between a school and the thing attacking it. That is called a front. It becomes a problem when the front is facing the wrong way." The beetle's rear legs struck the pavement. A crack raced toward the second evacuation lane. I ordered Mason to move the foam markers. Claire rerouted the next group through the gym exit. Apex remained focused on the shell. Grant looked irritated that the emergency kept interrupting his entrance. One of his fighters raised a phone beside him. The screen showed the bounty tip that had sent Apex here. Exclusive fixed drop. Armored core equipment. A geometric mark sat beneath the claim. 3 broken angles around a black center. The same mark from Dead City. Grant saw me looking and lowered the phone. Private Guild Intelligence, he said. You bought a tip from someone who also signed my assignment. Grant's jaw tightened. Apex verifies its sources. The teammate holding the phone looked at him. You promised the fix drop before we accepted the operation. The statement was not loud. It did not need to be. Every Apex fighter had heard the promise. Backing down now would expose that Grant had bought bait, sold certainty, and marched his guild into a school zone because the loot sounded exclusive. His status had already made the decision for him. Grant raised his weapon. We kill it, the drop proves the source. Or the source proves you are willing to attack anything carrying a price tag. Grant stepped closer. Are you challenging Apex's claim? No, I am letting you test it for free. Claire glanced at me. She understood before Grant did. A human fight would waste evacuation time. Apex had armor, numbers, and a marked promise they were desperate to validate. They could become the probe. I moved toward the school route instead of Grant. His expression sharpened. Walking away? I have children to move. You have a receipt to defend. That landed harder than another duel invitation. Grant turned toward the beetle. Apex formed around him. 2 shield users fixed the horn. Ranged fighters struck the leg joints I had already marked. A chain specialist wrapped the rear body and pulled it away from the bus lane. The guild was competent. That made Grant's certainty more dangerous, not less. Their first coordinated strike split 3 plates along the beetle's back. Black mist leaked through the seams. Grant saw the opening and committed every heavy attack at once. The beetle tried turning toward the school. Apex's chain line held it in place. Grant climbed the horn, crossed the skull, and drove his weapon into the cracked center plate. The shell caved inward. The giant body collapsed across the intersection. Apex fighter shouted. One member pulled a recording device toward Grant as he planted one boot on the beetle's head. Grant looked directly at me. That is how a real strike guild handles a boss. I watched the corpse. No clear notice appeared. No equipment formed. No one received a reward. The black mist beneath the shell moved against the wind. An Apex fighter checked the body. Where is the drop? Grant kept his boot in place. Processing delay. The beetle's crushed head shifted under him. The black mist climbed through every crack. I rested Fangbreaker against my shoulder. Congratulations, I told Grant. Your fixed drop is standing back up. The shell rebuilt itself under Grant's boot. Black mist climbed through the shattered plates and pulled them together from the inside. Cracks closed without healing. Each broken section moved as if hundreds of small hands were lifting it. Grant jumped down before the head completed its shape. Apex's celebration ended so fast the recording device was still pointed at him. The giant beetle rose. Its front horn had been cut, crushed, and chained. Now the pieces fitted together around a darker center. Grant raised his weapon. Second phase, convenient label, I said. Does it come with the missing equipment? The teammate with the phone lowered it. Nobody answered. The rebuilt beetle attacked before Grant could restore the speech. Its front leg struck the chain specialist and threw him across the road. Grant moved first and caught his teammate before the pavement did. Good rescue instinct. Then Grant looked past the injured man and searched the beetle for a brighter core. There was the problem again. Claire ordered Apex's medics toward their fighter. Mason opened a foam wall between the school route and the rising shell. I crossed the front joint and cut the line I had opened earlier. The plate fell away. No blood followed. A cluster of tiny black beetles filled the gap. They locked their bodies together where bones should have been, then crawled into a new support shape. The giant legs stood again. That was clue 1. This thing was not regenerating flesh, it was replacing structure. Grant attacked the exposed joint. His strike destroyed hundreds of small beetles and broke the leg again. A second cluster poured from the abdomen and rebuilt it. Grant smiled like the repeat had proved him right. Finite material. Break it faster than it can replace itself. Possible. Still not the same as a living boss. I cut across the lower abdomen while Apex held the head. The shell opened. No organs, no stomach, no spine, no central muscle, only layers of small insects packed around hollow channels. That was clue 2. The giant body was a shape, not an animal. I cut a narrow line along the abdomen and watched the response. The giant shell turned its head toward me, but the insects inside the cut did not protect anything behind them. They simply filled the missing plate. Grant ordered a spear user to strike the same opening. The spear entered deeper than my cut and came out clean. No blood, no organ tissue, only crushed beetles clinging to the metal. The spear user looked at Grant. No core. Deeper, Grant ordered. The fighter struck again. The shell allowed the spear to pass through one hollow channel, then shifted its weight and trapped the weapon between 2 rebuilt supports. The beetle swung. I cut the trapped shaft before the fighter went with it. Grant caught his teammate by the armor and pulled him clear. Another useful save. Another immediate return to the loot theory. Grant pointed toward the head. The abdomen is armor distribution. The core is above. The abdomen is empty. Then stop attacking it. I was testing your conclusion. His expression suggested science had become personally disrespectful. The shell rammed the pavement and opened a crack beneath the evacuation route. Mason filled the first half with his remaining foam. Claire ordered the students around the second half. I attacked the head from the side. The beetle protected the horn, not the skull. When I cut through the temple plate, packed insects crawled away from the opening instead of swarming the blade. No pain response, no defensive reflex. The head was a tool the colony could afford to lose. Grant saw the open plate and mistook access for confirmation. He drove his weapon into the gap. The shell collapsed one front leg, absorbed the impact through the pavement, and used the rear body to turn toward the school. It had sacrificed the supposed vital point to gain a better line on civilians. A school alarm sounded behind the fog. The remaining evacuation group had reached the exterior stairwell. Then a roof cable snapped. A metal railing tore from the school wall and crashed across the protected lane. Mason's foam barrier took the first impact, but the route folded under it. Students inside the building stopped moving. Claire turned toward the school. West stair is blocked. Mason, alternate route. Mason ran before she finished. The beetle moved too. Its body ignored the fighters, damaging its head, and turned toward the weaker footsteps inside the building. That was clue 3. A living boss protected vital points. This shell protected the route to slow prey. Grant followed the cracked skull. The head is reacting. Core is inside. It is reacting because you keep announcing your location with a hammer. Grant struck anyway. The head plate split. The body did not defend it. Instead, the rear legs drove toward the school gate. 1 block deeper in the fog, the emergency stair door opened. A schoolboy stepped out alone. He had been separated when the railing fell. Dust covered his hair. 1 shoe was missing. He saw the giant shell and froze directly inside its attack lane. Claire shouted for him to get down. The boy looked toward the voice instead of the monster. The beetle's horn came forward. Grant was still moving toward the cracked head. His fixed drop had finally become more important than the child standing beneath it. I drove Gale Step through my calves. The skill had already moved me through Dead City, Central Plaza, and the school route. It had also spent every use turning my legs into increasingly angry equipment. Both calves burned. I crossed the lane anyway. The boy disappeared beneath my arm. The horn struck Greyhide across my back. Armor prevented the point from entering. The impact launched both of us through a broken fence panel. I turned before landing and took the pavement under my shoulder so the boy hit armor instead of concrete. My ribs filed the complaint in person. The boy opened his eyes. "You alive?" I asked. He nodded once. "Excellent. Run to the woman yelling at everyone." Claire had already reached the opening. The boy ran toward her. A stream of small beetles broke from the giant body and chased him along the curb. Mason came from the opposite lane, sprayed foam across the first cluster, and crushed the second beneath his treatment case. The case dented. Mason looked at it. "This was expensive!" "Added to the agency invoice," I told him. Claire caught the schoolboy and pushed him behind the barrier. Then she raised her radio. "Schoolboy recovered by Evan Cole. All combat target calls move through Evan until this zone is clear. Apex handles assigned lanes." The order hit every speaker in the block. Grant looked back from the shell's head. "Apex does not answer to a contractor." Claire kept one hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then stop needing him to rescue the people behind you." Several Apex fighters looked at the child. One lowered his weapon first and moved to Mason's lane. Another followed. Grant's authority did not vanish because an official said so. It cracked because everyone had watched him choose the wrong target. The child was safe before I allowed myself one breath. Claire glanced across the field. "Evan." She had used my first name on the radio. I raced Fangbreaker. "Careful, that sounded personal. You were just hit by a bus-sized insect." Concern confirmed. Claire's stare could have cut bark without my sword. "Find the target." "There she is. Professional romance remains alive." Mason looked between us. "Should I change channels?" "No," Claire and I answered together. The beetle charged again. Excellent. The monster had rescued the conversation. I returned to the shell while Grant prepared another finishing strike. The body had 3 proven behaviors now. Small beetles rebuilt the joints. The abdomen contained no organs. The entire mass prioritized slow civilian movement over damaged body parts. I cut across the skull again. The shell split. Inside, more insects moved through empty channels. None behaved like a brain. They simply changed position when the outer body needed another shape. That was clue 4. The head was a weapon mount. Grant drove his heavy strike through the opening I had made. The skull collapsed. Apex fighters cheered more cautiously this time. The body dropped to one side. Grant stepped over my blade line and planted his weapon in the center. "Core destroyed," he announced. No clear notice appeared. No reward dropped. The same teammate checked his phone. The marked tip still promised fixed equipment. Reality had now rejected the claim twice. Grant's face tightened. I placed one hand against the fallen shell. No heartbeat, no breathing, no pain response when I cut the underside. Black mist poured from every opened plate and carried surviving insects toward the damaged gaps. I finally named it. "This is a shell." Grant laughed too loudly. You are guessing because Apex exposed the mechanic. I looked at him across the overturned shell. Your mechanic has killed your reward twice. One Apex fighter lowered his hooked weapon. Grant saw it. Claire's officers followed my calls. The rescued child reached the school gate. A teacher pulled him through the barrier and checked the missing shoe, torn backpack, and blood on his sleeve. The boy pointed back at me. He said not to stop for the logo people. Several agency officers heard him. One Apex fighter looked down at the gold emblem across his chest. Grant did not. The child's safety had become a public review of every adult still choosing loot. His own team waited for proof that the famous tip still deserved obedience. Backing down would leave him alive and embarrassed. Grant chose a third option, embarrassed with momentum. The head is the anchor, he ordered. Apex takes the final strike. Claire stepped into his path. The last bus has not cleared the block. Grant moved around her. Then clear it faster. I genuinely do not know what he thought a second stolen finish would prove. The first corpse had stood up beneath his boot. He had received a live demonstration with premium seating. Claire changed the evacuation lane while Grant organized the finish. Mason moved 2 injured civilians behind a truck and kept the last bus angled toward the east barrier. That gave me one hard limit. I could not let the shell rotate past my right shoulder. Every choice in the fight now served that lane, not the easiest attack. Apex attacked anyway. 2 fighters chained the beetle's rear legs to a street fixture. Another drove a hook through the cracked neck seam. Grant climbed the overturned body and raised his weapon over its head. I could have knocked him off. The last bus was still turning beyond the fog, and several injured civilians remained with Mason. Fighting Grant would release the shell toward them, so I pinned the beetle's horn and kept the body facing away from the evacuation lane. Grant mistook the opening for his victory. Watch closely, warrior. I have been. That is why this hurts. Grant brought his weapon down. The beetle's head burst against the pavement. For half a second, every leg went still. Grant stood inside the wreckage and spread both arms. Fixed drop, he demanded. Nothing appeared. His smile held for one painful beat. Then green mist poured from the crushed head. Apex fighter stumbled backward. The mist wrapped the broken plates, filled the empty neck, and pulled the entire shell upright with greater force than before. The chain snapped. One rear leg swept several Apex members across the street. Grant barely rolled beneath the strike. One Apex fighter reached for him. Grant pushed the man toward the retreat lane before climbing up himself. Another useful instinct surfaced under the greed. Then he looked at the marked tip again, and the obsession reclaimed the rest of his attention. The revived beetle rose taller because green mist packed every fracture with moving black mass. Its broad shell bulged in several places at once. Grant stopped boasting. He looked at the marked tip on his wrist, then at the creature that had rejected it twice. His hand shook before he closed the display. There! The guild expert had finally met customer feedback. I cut down the next sweeping leg and forced the shell away from Mason's root. Claire used the opening immediately. Last injured group, move. East barricade in 30 seconds. The beetle twisted toward her voice. Then every seam across its body opened at once. The giant shell burst apart before it reached Claire. Thousands of beetles poured from every seam and filled the intersection like black rain. The head, legs, and abdomen had been crowds wearing one body. Apex had bought an exclusive boss and received a group project. The swarm split into several streams. Some rushed the last injured civilians. One climbed the school wall. The rest circled Grant's scattered team, then knotted together into half-formed limbs whenever they found an isolated target. Each apparent revival had been the swarm rebuilding its costume. An Apex fighter swung through the nearest stream. His weapon killed dozens, yet the remaining insects opened around the blade and closed behind it. A second fighter tried to crush them against a storefront. The swarm scattered under his boots, climbed the wall, and formed a new horn above his shoulder. Grant dragged him clear before it struck. For the first time that day, the guild's teamwork protected a person instead of a reward. I cut through another stream, but killing random insects changed nothing. The survivors curved around Fangbreaker and rejoined behind me. The broad attacks were feeding motion into a problem with thousands of spare bodies. Claire dragged one injured officer clear. Mason has the east lane open. We need 10 more seconds. I will buy them. Mason moved beside the final civilian group with his treatment case strapped across one shoulder. 6 students supported an injured teacher while officers held plastic shields over them. The West Stream noticed the slowest person and bent toward the group. I stepped into its path. Fangbreaker split the front rank. My second cut struck lower, forcing the insects upward. Claire drove a road barrier through the opening and sent the civilians beneath it. A second stream crawled beneath the stalled bus and began forming a hooked leg around the rear axle. Mason saw the metal rise. He emptied a field foam canister beneath the chassis, locking hundreds of insects together long enough for officers to drag the teacher past. The trapped beetles chewed through the foam within seconds. The delay still mattered. One civilian step became 5, then 10. One stream climbed my armor. Greyhide stopped the mandibles from reaching skin, but hundreds of feet found every seam and pulled in different directions. I rolled through the pavement, crushed the first layer, and used Fangbreaker's flat to scrape the rest away without cutting toward the civilians. Claire kicked one cluster from my shoulder. "Still sorting?" she asked, very aggressively. The swarm divided around us, then reunited on the other side. Every turn happened together. Every retreat happened together. Grant rose near the crushed head shell and raised his weapon again. Man, the fake boss had respawned twice, exploded into thousands of pieces, and this man still believed the third finish belonged to him. Confidence had become a medical condition. "Pike, cover the school wall," Claire ordered. Grant stared at the streams circling the intersection. "There has to be a core. There are civilians behind you." A core means a drop. Claire's expression suggested his future medical needs had expanded. I blocked another wave before she acted on it. Grant's obsession still contained one useful idea. A body this coordinated needed a control point. The swarm turned together. Every stream changed direction within the same fraction of a second. Something was issuing the move before the rest obeyed. I feinted toward the school wall. The west stream reacted first. The others followed a heartbeat later. Too broad. The command source could still hide among hundreds. I repeated the feint toward Grant's side. This time Claire threw a loose barrier toward the school wall at the same moment. The streams reacted to both movements. One corrected before either threat became real. The early correction came from information, not reflex. Something small was watching the whole field and issuing the decision. I slammed Fangbreaker flat against the pavement. The vibration scattered the nearest insects and forced 3 streams to climb. Again, one stream corrected before the others. The commander was moving with Grant's side of the battlefield. I activated borrowed sight. The skill gave me nearby living viewpoints only. A pigeon watched the rooftops. A trapped dog saw beneath a parked car. A rat looked through a storm drain beside the school wall. 3 angles hit my mind at once, then 7, then too many. Every bird, animal, and surviving insect within reach tried to become a window. The pigeon's horizon tilted with every wing beat. The dog's feed came sideways beneath the car. The rat saw the world inches above water. Insect feeds multiplied between them, each one moving too quickly for a human sense of scale. Borrowed sight did exactly what I had chosen it to do. My brain objected to receiving the entire neighborhood at once. The feeds struck from different heights and directions. My balance failed. A swarm stream hit Greyhide and drove me against a bus. Claire dropped a barrier between us before the insects reached my face. "Evan, I am sorting. You are bleeding." Added to the invoice. She did not laugh. Tough crowd. I cut the pigeon feed first, then the dog. The rat's low view stayed because it showed the undersides of the streams. I pruned every animal viewpoint that did not cover Grant's side. The number dropped from dozens to 5. Then I let borrowed sight reach the insects themselves. Most views arrived as fragments, pavement, shell, another beetle's rear leg, the edge of Grant's boot. One feed moved before the command reached it. The viewpoint belonged to a beetle no larger than my fingernail. Its eyes did not stay on prey. They moved across the school wall, Grant, Claire's barrier, and every major stream in sequence. It was not fighting, it was checking the board. The tiny body sat inside the noisiest part of the swarm because every larger movement protected it from attention. It stayed beneath a larger stream near Grant, shifting position whenever he crossed my sight line. A pale pulse left its body. Every other stream turned. There was the commander. Mason's radio broke through the overload. 6 students and 1 teacher at the east barrier. The final group was nearly clear. I dropped every feed except the rat and the tiny beetle. The world snapped back into one body. I pointed Fangbreaker toward Grant's left shoulder. "Move!" Grant followed my focus instead of the order. He saw the small beetle, mistook my attention for his discovery, and stepped across the clean strike line. "I found it," Grant announced. Of course he did. The commander shifted beneath his raised arm. I drove Gale Step through exhausted calves. The street narrowed to one line. Grant's head sat inside it. "Your haircut is in danger," I warned. He ducked too late. Fangbreaker passed above his scalp. A strip of hair spun into the air. The blade continued through the fingernail-sized commander. Both halves struck the pavement. For one fraction of a second, the nearby beetles continued the last command. Then, no new pulse arrived. Their paths drifted apart before the rest of the intersection understood the controller was gone. The effect moved outward like a broken rhythm, not an explosion. The pale pulse stopped. Every swarm stream lost timing. One turned left while the next continued forward. 2 reconstructed limbs collided and collapsed. Beetles at the school wall scattered instead of climbing. A stream that had been climbing the school wall turned into itself and fell. Another tried rebuilding a horn but attached both sides at different angles. The structure collapsed before it reached Mason. Agency officers stopped swinging at the center of the mass and began isolating smaller clusters. The commander kill had not erased the threat. It had changed the threat from one coordinated army into targets human teams could finally manage. The black rain had become thousands of separate, confused insects. Grant touched the missing strip on his head. You cut my hair. I saved the useful part. Claire used the opening before he could answer. East Lane, move now. Mason, take all 7 through the barrier. Mason counted the 6 students and 1 injured teacher as they crossed. 7 clear. Claire turned toward the remaining officers. Rear cover, nobody chases loot. Grant looked at the 2 commander halves. Then he looked at his scattered guild. For once, the mark on his wrist offered no speech. He raised his weapon toward Apex. Follow Claire's rear cover order. The guild obeyed. The injured teacher crossed last. 1 student kept a hand under the teacher's elbow until Mason counted both of them through. Claire did not celebrate. She turned the cleared lane into a new barrier line and assigned every available officer to contain the insects behind it. Grant placed 2 Apex fighters beside her officers without arguing about ownership. The final civilians disappeared beyond the fog. The swarm remained alive. It was disorganized, angry, and spread across the entire intersection. I raised Fangbreaker. None of you are leaving this block.